أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Good morning and welcome all to the IPPA Hpat webinar. My name is Adil and I'll be giving a brief introduction to what this webinar is all about. So we're essentially just explaining some tips and tactics for how to approach and prepare for the three individual sections of the Hpat and the exam as a whole. And this webinar is being presented by fellow students who've done the Hpat in recent years and have been very successful. The presenters are studying medicine in various universities in Ireland, such as UCD, Trinity, and RCSI. So we'd like to just share our own experiences and tips for how we went about doing the exam. Just before we begin, we'll just go through a few ground rules. So just have a read of that and make sure, just make sure that your microphones are muted. If you want to ask any questions, you can just ask away in the chat box, and we'll try and do our best to answer them during the Q&A session. And these recordings will be made public after the session due to high demand. So yeah, we'll be sharing them on the IPPA socials. So predominantly the YouTube and the Facebook. So keep an eye out for that. It's just in terms of the disclaimer, this is a volunteer program and it is organized with the intention to benefit the community. We're not, or IPPA or its members are individually or collectively are not responsible for the desired outcome of the participant's own Hpat exam, nor do they offer any warranty or guarantee expressly or impliedly. The desired results can only be achieved by the individual's own efforts. This program is run by students who have achieved a high score in their Hpat exam, and we're all voluntarily sharing our experience, approach, and tips, and which all helped us achieve our scores. Okay. So now that we have that out of the way, we'll just go through. Let's move on then. So we have done this talk a few times beforehand. So we've done it once in person in the Islamic Cultural Centre of Ireland in Clonskeagh in January 2020. And we've also done an online webinar on Zoom in August 2020. So the talk today will be a mixture of both live and recorded elements. And there will be a question and answer session towards the end of the talk. We'll try and answer as many questions as we can. So we are doing this talk in a different manner from previously. So at the start, we'll be focusing on the fifth year content. So that will be quite basic stuff. So we'll be going through the sections very briefly. And this is just to help the fifth year students to get a feel for what the Hpat is all about. So don't worry if you're somewhat lost. We are planning to do another more fleshed out version of the talk in August, to have sort of all the information in it. Yeah, if you don't get all the tactics and everything from these talks, then we will be going over it again. Then afterwards, the talk will be geared more towards the sixth year students who are doing the exam in a few weeks, and that content will be mainly geared towards the actual exam day and the build up towards the exam. And we'll also have some brief tips for the individual sections for the exam day as well. So we welcome everyone to stay for the whole event. However, if the sixth year students feel that the initial stage of the talk isn't as beneficial, yeah, feel free to come back later on at around 10:45 just to listen to the more six-year focused content. Okay, I'll now pass it on to Dr. Khalid Khan, a consultant orthopedic surgeon and founder of IPPA, to explain who IPPA are and the work that they are doing and are continuing to do. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Adil. Thanks for the nice introduction. And I think before I start, I give time to the participant to have a look at the schedule today. And if you want to just elaborate it a little bit, and then I can do the IPPA introduction.
Yeah, sure. So as Dr. Khan has said, this is the schedule for today. So as you can see, we have split the webinar into two different parts. So initially, we'll be going through the basics, so explaining what the Hpat is. Then we're on to some brief 10-minute guides for each of the three sections. This will be kind of going through those sections quite quickly. But yeah, again, we will be having a more fleshed out version of the talk in August, and plus they will be available online as well. And then afterwards, we'll be giving the talk more towards the sixth year students. So we'll have a talk on improving your Hpat score, a talk on the day of the exam, some brief tips for each of the individual sections, then some alternate routes into medicine, and then that'll be followed by a Q&A session. And then after that, I mean, that Q&A session can go on for as long as necessary. So don't really worry about the time there. And yeah, and then after that, we'll just wrap it up, and we'll just ask you to please fill out an anonymous feedback form, just so we know what to improve on. Okay.
That's great, Adil. Thanks very much. And again, for all those, I'll introduce what IPPA, most of you might know, but I think just reinforce this point that this is mainly, we are just giving a brief description of 3 sections of Hpat, but there is a detailed recording of this full detailed description of the 3 sections, which will be available soon online. And we will conduct another webinar in August or September, focusing on that in more detailed discussion. Today is more towards the exam techniques and things, but just still for benefited for people. They know what they are looking at for Hpat, what they would be finding in Hpat for the new students. Anyway, I'll start my talk without wasting much time. So Irish Pakistani Professional Association, as the name says, it's a organization of Pakistani origin professionals, and it was founded with a vision to help and support the new generation. We are a group of professionals from different specialties who believe in collective efforts to promote integration in our society without compromising on cultural values and beliefs, and to make Ireland a country where people can live with peace, harmony, and respect. The main aims of our organization is to highlight the achievement of Irish Pakistani professionals and their contribution to the Irish society, to provide professional support and career guidance to the young generation in Ireland, to help integrate the Pakistani community with Irish community and with other communities, and to support community welfare activities. Today's event is on the same lines. And just to give you a brief description of the organization, it has 2 major sections, which is Med and Hpat. As the name give you some idea, Med is mainly we have doctors and other healthcare professionals who are involved with the healthcare in any way. They are in this group, and Hpat involved mainly ICT, IT engineers, and other professionals. And we also have accountants, solicitors, business managers, and who are professional practicing their profession in Ireland have origin from Pakistan. We like to provide our students and young professional guidance, arranging academic and research activities, and helping them to improve their CV and interview skills. And we also have mentorship program, and this is Hpat is one of the events on that respect. I won't waste much time, but give you a brief description of activities. And we started our journey in March 2019 on inauguration ceremony, and then we had some family event, and we started nicely, but unfortunately we all know this is a community event for the Hvac inheritance, and this is the one of the first we did in the Hpat, and that was, which Adil mentioned, face-to-face in Klonsky Islamic Cultural Center, and it was very successful, and we had good participant, and from there we got excellent feedback, and that's why we're continuing this program. We all know that we were stuck in the COVID, and then we changed our direction, being a very, a good number of professionals available. So we diverted our energy to help the society in Ireland and in Pakistan, and we set up helpline for health, legal, accounts, and other problems. And we also try whatever we can do within our resources to supply the PPEs in Pakistan and to ration in poor area, whatever the capacity of the IPP at that time. And there in the picture, I must say tribute to this Professor Pasha, late Professor Pasha, who helped us from Multan University Hospital, and he unfortunately passed away in COVID later on. Then this is Hpat event, which is combined with the Pakistan Embassy, first of its kind to help the professionals in IT, young professionals. And this is a Hpat was again, we did online. This is a community and for students cyberbullying program. We help medical students in CV writing and interview skills, which is very important. We have support from learned professors from Ireland, and it was very successful, some social event. And this is representation from 9 different countries to give an insight about the medical career options, and very useful program. We participated in that one. And this is a very important webinar in which the Professor Brendan Kelly gave the medical students and medical doctors how they can do research and how they can progress in their career. This is also communication skill, very important aspect of all professionals and especially in medicine. So this was very successful at participation from At that time, Medical Council President Rita Doyle and Professor Gillen and other learned speakers. We have this one of its kind artificial intelligence from Hpat Tech, and very well taken by all the community. We gave an excellent webinar on IMC registration process for the people who are interested to come or who are here and they're trying to get registered or work in Ireland for the doctors. And this, the will and inheritance, because we successfully repeated that. And we are now, these are future events we are looking at. I think I'll stop here and give it back to you, Adil. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Khan. So before we start, I'll just introduce the speakers that we have today. So we have Saad Khan, a third-year student in Trinity. We have Azam Moraine, a second-year student in UCD. Saad Hussain, a fourth-year student in RCSI. Ramin Khalid, a second-year student in RCSI. Imad Mirza, a fourth-year student in Trinity. And then myself, Adil Mirza, and I'm a third-year student in UCD. So first, the first talk will be given by Saad Hussain, just to give an introduction to what the Hpat is, its format, and some strategies to employ when studying, and ultimately why it's beneficial.
What is the Hpat? Okay, so taken from A there, it's designed to assess logical reasoning and problem-solving skills, and then the ability to understand the thoughts and behaviors of other people. Okay, it's unlike any exam you've done before. It's completely different from reading research, and we'll be going into more detail about all that there. Okay, all questions will be multiple choice, and you'll be required to select the most appropriate answer. So really quickly here, so again, for those who don't know, there's three sections, section 1, 2, and 3. So section 1 will measure the candidate's problem-solving skills. Section 2 will be more about, the emotions and thoughts, something very different from what you've seen before. And section 3 will also be very different as well. It'll be all about patterns, sequences, stuff like that. I'll give you a nice short little table there. It shows you the three sections, how many questions there is, the time required for each section. And then at the bottom, I find a really good rule, the number of questions to be completed in 10 minutes. So I like to call this the 898 rule. So I always use this in my practice exams, but even in the real thing, is that like in section 1, you try to complete 8 questions in 10 minutes, and then in section 2, 9 questions in 10 minutes. It's a nice little nifty rule, and that's really helpful to everyone who's doing that there. Okay, so how to beat the Hpat? Okay, so people will tell you can study for this exam. That's 100% true. When I was doing the Leaving Cert, again, people would tell me, oh, it's an aptitude test, no point studying, no point doing exams, focus on your Leaving Cert. But I chose to ignore that, and time again, people have shown that the more work you put into this, the maximum efficiency that you will get from this exam. So again, you can study for this exam. You just need to put in the work, put in the effort, and most importantly, have the mindset. Okay. After teaching hundreds of people about this exam, 2 most important things that I'd say about the Hpat is not the questions themselves. It would be number 1, timing, and the number 2, stress. Okay. So number 1, timing. Okay. So the Hpat is a 2.5-hour exam. Okay. It's going to be long, even though it's a bit shorter than the Leaving Cert one. You have to put 100% of your brain's focus on the exam. Okay, every single second counts. So timing is crucial, and it's completely different from what you've seen in the Leaving Cert. And that's why we recommend that you guys do all your practice exams, and you work through them and all that stuff, just to get a grasp of how time intensive this exam is. Number 2 would be stress. Okay, I've seen so many people stress so much over this exam. You can do as many questions as you want, go through all the exams, but at the end of the day, on the day of the exam, if you're going in there with the wrong mindset, it's just not going to work out. And I'm sure a few people will talk about that later, more in depth, but definitely stress would be, just from the get-go, it's just so important to just keep it under control. And especially in the next few months, when you're preparing for the Hpat, you see all your friends doing it, and, you just I have to do better. I have to get my 100% off, stuff like that. But, if you do have that kind of mindset, then it's just not going to work out. You need to just be relaxed and chill about it. And if you put the work in and have the right mindset, hopefully things will go well. So just some key strategies right there. So I'll just quickly go through these. So, number 1 will be have a look at the questions then before you read the passage. Again, kind of obvious, but something that, I always use. Okay, don't be afraid to skip questions. You don't always have to answer every single question. Again, the Hpat isn't like a leaving cert where you have to go through every single part of the question and then look at the answer. You have to put your time in different places and try to maximize your efficiency there. Okay. And apart from doing questions is great, but I think the number one thing I'd say is reading. Okay. And it sounds weird, but if you read as much as you can before the Hpat, it will definitely help you for section 1 and section 2. Yeah, so I'd say reading definitely. So stuff like non-fiction, fiction, something like Time Magazine, the Irish Times, anything like that, The Economist, anything with some sort of complex reading, I'd say would be definitely beneficial for you guys. And then again, for section 2, reading fiction, I'd say is really, really important. Out of all the people that I've talked to that have done extremely well in section 2, the one thing that they had in common was that they were reading some sort of fiction books from a young age. Again, yeah, when I talked about like doing practice questions, understanding where you went wrong is extremely important. So, a lot of people do the exams and they'll be like, I got this right and I got this wrong. And if I got it wrong, I'm just bad. But, that's not the way to go around. What you want to do is every single question that you do wrong, you can look at it and be like, okay, I got it wrong, but now it's an opportunity to learn where I went wrong so I won't make this mistake again. It's not about the questions themselves, but the skills that you take from these questions and then apply them to future. Again, that'll be it. And then making a Hpat notebook, so that'll be really important as well. I like to make a little quick notebook and kind of scribble in the questions that I got wrong and kind of seeing where I went wrong, just something really quick. And for section 3, I like to make it quick, like, one of those like math copy A5 notebooks and kind of draw in the patterns. I thought that was really helpful for myself so that when I look back on it, I can kind of remember the patterns and it's a lot more helpful for section 3. Just really quickly, so I'm going to show you a quick percentile curve. So on the y-axis, you can see the percentile, and on the x-axis, you can see the Hpat overall score. So you can see that very few people score above 179. So again, you'd want to be going for somewhere over 80th percentile. So if you see that it's a very few percentage of people that actually get the score that they want. And that's why it is a very hard exam. Again, something similar there. So you can see the Hpat overall score and the number of people. And you can see that a lot of people score between 129, 169, something like that. So why would a doctor need section 1 skills? Okay, so, doctors need to be able to think quickly, okay, to think under pressure. So I'll show you just a quick schematic here. So if you look at this, for people who've done something like a Hpat before, this kind of looks like something like a section 1 question. But in reality, it's actually the wet flag approach that pediatric doctors use. And it could be the difference between a child's life or death. Okay, so I'm just going to skim through this really quickly, but a section 1 general strategy. Again, skim through the questions first, speed read the article, you make your flow charts or diagrams, and use process of elimination. Again, I'm sure Umar will go through it in more detail, so I'll just go over that now. And then why the doctor needs section 2 skills. So again, that's all about the empathy and the kind of relating to other people and the thoughts and emotions. Okay, so again, a caring doctor is really important, and yeah, that's more I can say about that. And so again, another section 2 general strategy is again to read the passage, read the questions, and then go through all the answer types. And again, you'll see that more in detail later on. For section 3, even though it is all patterns and all sequences, it's important to know that you need that good spatial awareness, and that's really important for stuff like MRIs, X-rays, surgery, all that stuff. So having that kind of good spatial non-verbal reasoning is also really important. Again, it's all to be going through this in more detail, but you'd want to, again, it's all about patterns, and you'd want to make sure that you memorize those patterns and you know the different types of patterns that are occurring.
Thank you very much for that. So now we'll move on to the 3 sections. So Saad Khan will go through section 1 and 3, and I'll go through section 2. So I'll just pass it on to Saad to explain what section 1 is and some tips relating to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Adil. Hi guys, my name is Saad Khan. I'm a third-year medical student currently studying at Trinity College, and I'm just going to give you a quick rundown on the section 1, the Hpat. So as a quick introduction, the section contains 44 questions and you have to complete them in 65 minutes. This is quite a big time frame. However, it is probably the most difficult to complete in time section, in my opinion. I found it quite difficult even on the day to do that. So I would probably advise trying to just about like get all the questions done in time. And when you're doing your practice, make sure you do timed practice because you don't want to be going into exam day without doing that. In section 1, you're going to have 4 types of questions. You have logical reasoning, problem solving, data interpretation, and research methods. Later on in this talk, I'm just going to go over brief descriptions of what all of those questions entail and a few strategies for each of them. So just a few tips. Obviously, timing, you want to know where you can spend more time and when you can make more time. What I mean by this is, for example, for myself, I found logical reasoning quite easy. I was able to finish those questions in under 1 minute 30 seconds. However, problem solving for me was a bit of my weak side, and I ended up using more than 1 minute 30 seconds in those. So you can kind of split your time up a bit like that. You don't need to keep the same time for each question. And sometimes you also get difficult questions. And in order to stay on pace for the exam, you're going to want to just use process of elimination and try to just make an educated guess and move on. You don't want to be ending up with 5 minutes spent on just one difficult question trying to do that. It's not a good idea. And when you're in the exam, you want to time yourself, but you don't want to time yourself too frequently. So what I found really helpful is you try to, as Hussein explained earlier as well, sometimes you can try to do 11 questions every 15 minutes. So every 15 minutes, you can check your time, or every 11 questions, check your time. See, did it take you 15 minutes or you take more time? And you can know whether you need to speed up or slow down, even if you want to. And then how do you improve your section 1 speed? It was also mentioned earlier. You have to increase your ability to read quickly. Increase your ability to sort of skim read. So you'd basically be scanning through the passage, looking for relevant information to the question stem and using that information. You want to have a good practice environment for your practice test that I'm sure the 6th year students have done and the 5th year students will do in the future. So what this means is just have a quiet environment where you have a piece of paper, a pencil, obviously keep your water bottle with you. I'm always constantly drinking water, and you will be in exam as well. Make sure you have a quiet area as well, and just like really time yourself on your practice exams to familiarize yourself. And yeah, so using your space, obviously you can write on the practice in the exam sheet on the day as well, and you work on your mental maths because you will not have your trusty calculator with you. You're gonna have to be able to do all those numbers in your head really quickly. So starting off with logical reasoning, the questions involve a series of statements that you need to select the response the most logically drawn from the information. Basically, what that means is you get a question that's like, oh, which of the following can be inferred from the passage? Which of the following cannot be true, or the passage best supports? So you just have to use your own logical sort of reasoning to figure out what the passage is trying to say to you, essentially, and you need to choose what the strongest conclusion is going to be. So always remember to choose what must be true rather than what is probably true. So always make sure that your answer is the strongest answer available. Don't just look through the answers and see, okay, A is incorrect, B looks like it could be correct, I'm just going to choose B and move on. You should probably consider all of the answers until you get to one that you know is like, without a doubt, the best answer. And then when you answer the statements, use your pencil and just cross off answers. This is just really good to keep your head clear. You don't want to be considering every single option, even if you know something is like completely wrong. So for example, if you saw A, B, C, D, you read A and C or something, and they're both really obviously wrong, and you basically just need to consider B and D. Just do a line through A and C so you know that like you just have 2 answers to consider. And always read the question stem carefully. I really can't stress this enough, especially for section 1. I feel like they always like adding in a little word like not or least. So what they might be saying is, based off the passage above, which of these statements is not true? So if you just scanned the question stem and you didn't read it carefully, you might have missed the not, and you would just choose one of the statements which is true. But obviously the question is looking for what's not true, and you would 100% get that question wrong. So always look out for those words. And then always use information given in the stimulus, don't use prior knowledge. So that means, say if there's a question about your extraocular muscles in your eyes or your oculomotor nerve, something like that. Even if you know a lot about that stuff from before the Hpat, don't use your outside knowledge in these type of questions. You should just use the knowledge that's given to you in the stimulus. And then know the difference between correlation and causation. I know many of you will, but just to reinforce that, if, for example, there's an increase in temperature and we notice an increase in sale in ice creams, that would probably be a causation because people are feeling hot and they want to eat something cold. And then you might also see an increase in temperature causing an increase in sunscreen, because obviously you need sunscreen from the heat or from the sun rays. But there wouldn't be a causation between ice cream sales and sunscreen use. That wouldn't make sense. It would be more of a correlation because they're both being caused by another thing, but they're correlating with each other. So you would be seeing increase in ice cream sales and sunscreen sales. All right, moving on for problem solving. Obviously, you want to keep your booklet as clear as possible and be able to write as little as possible. You don't want to be writing massive essays of notes. So obviously just abbreviate. For example, W for Wednesday. That'll just make it a lot easier for yourself. And you can understand that sometimes you need to deduce information. So not all of the information is given to you. An example of this is you could have a question that says, John is older than Connor. Connor is older than Adam. And you need to deduce the information that John is also older than Adam. That's just another thing you do. And then you can make your whole number values in some questions. Particularly some questions I like asking are questions on false positives and things like that. When they give that, you could usually use an example like I've given here. So if 20% of the population are vegetarian, 1% of vegetarians are vegan, you can let the population be 1,000 and therefore vegetarians 200 and vegans are 2. It's just these whole numbers can be a lot more easy to understand rather than decimals. So it can keep your brain a little bit more clear during the exam. So in problem solving, you're looking for the correct answer, not just the best answer. So in this one, you want the actual right answer, unlike logical reasoning, where you're just looking for the strongest answer. And obviously, this is just true for the whole HPAT. If you're spending too long, just make an educated guess and move on. I'm just going to go over this nice little question here. It's a pretty fun question about racing horses and trying to figure out which are the 3 fastest horses. So you can read here, there are 25 horses. You can race up to 5 horses at a time, but you don't have a watch to time them. What is the minimum number of races needed to identify the fastest 3 horses? I'm just going to run through the question with you. So the first thing you want to do is race 5 horses from each group. So what I've done here is written down A, B, C, D, E. So these are groups of 5 horses. I raced each of them. So I raced all the horses in A, all in B, and so on. And then I found out who were the fastest in each group, and I raced the fastest of each group. So in doing that, I raced every single group once. That was 5 races done. Then I raced the fastest of each group. That was 1 more race. So now I'm at 6 races done. And I figured out that, we'll just say that A1 was the fastest horse overall. And as you can remember in the question stem, you were asked, what are the 3 fastest horses? So the rule that you should figure out from that is if there's a horse, right? Like let's say D1, if he has 3 horses that are confirmed to be faster than him, then this horse is eliminated from the answer. And also every single horse behind him or below him. So for that reason, all of these horses are out of the running. And using those same rules, you can figure out that these horses are not in the running. Reason is because A4 over here, this guy was definitely slower than A3, A2, and A1. That's 3 horses that are faster than him. It's impossible for him to be in the top 3. And the same rule applies for this guy because B3 was slower than B2 and B1, and B1 was slower than A1, so that's 3 horses faster than him. He's out. But the thing that we have to consider here is that because we didn't have a watch time each of the horses, we actually don't know whether A3 is faster than C1 or the other way around. We actually don't know that. So for that reason, it'll actually take you 7 races to figure out the top 3 fastest horses, because the final race will involve A3, A2, B2, B1, and C1. And from these 5 guys, we'll figure out the 2nd and 3rd fastest horses. And that'll be the answer to the question. So data interpretation. These questions, they involve graphs, tables, and other representations like data like Venn diagrams, which you'll be familiar with from Leaving Cert, flowcharts, and also 3-axis graphs, which you might not be too familiar with. But a 3-axis graph is basically like you would have an x-axis, you would have a y-axis, and then another y-axis on the right side. And the 2 y-axes would probably show different information. And you just need to adjust to that and probably practice those a little bit. So some questions can contain the same information represented by multiple things. Like you could have a question that's representing the same information using a graph and also by a table. And particular questions that they could ask about that information, it might be more useful to look at the table in some of them, and it might be more useful to look at the graph in some of them. So should be aware about that. And before you read the text of the question, you should look over the graph or the table. I think it's pretty easy to just do a quick scan and see like, oh, what is this table trying to represent, or what's this graph trying to represent? And always remember to look at your axes and look at the units. So a 10 on a graph could represent 10 meters, 10 million euro, or 10 years. You need to be really familiar with your units, because if they ask you a question, they want the answer in centimeters, but the graph's in meters, you have to do your own adjustments. And finally, we have the research methods. Prior knowledge is actually a bit useful here. So if you have prior knowledge of how research trials, investigations are done, it can help you understand basic concepts inside these questions. They're going to involve identifying the study, what makes like interferences in the data, try and make conclusions from the study, and propose how the study could be improved. So for that, you're going to need to know the scientific method. Scientific method involves using only one variable change between test to test, keep all of the factors the same, and that there's a control group to which you can compare the experiment. So basically, if they say, for example, how could this study be improved? You would want to say that the study is, it could be improved if you had a higher number of participants, because having a higher number of participants can reduce the effective outliers on the results. That would be one sort of logical thing that you could add in to improve a study or something like that if they ask that question. And then another thing is be familiar with the vocabulary that they're going to use, like participants, control groups, placebos, and hypotheses, things like that. Anyways, that is the end of my section 1 guide. So I'm going to stop there and I'll hand it back over to Adil Mirza.
Thank you very much, Saad, for that. My name is Adil Mirza. I'm a third year medical student in UCD. I did my Hpat in 2019 and I scored in the 90th percentile. So I'm just going to be giving you a brief introduction into section 2 and what it's all about, really. So we'll just start with a bit of general information. So there's 36 questions they have to get done in 45 minutes. So if you use a checkpoint system, that means you have to get 12 questions done every 15 minutes. It seems to be quite a lot, but I found this to be the least time pressure section. And in my practice exams, I tend to be finishing with a few minutes to spare. But keep in mind that in the actual exam, the passages can be quite long, and they're longer than what I was used to. So you should be prepared to read faster and answer questions faster. And perhaps in your practice exams, trying to finish with a bit of spare time left, just so you have that bit of leeway going into the exam. So what is this section all about? It's about applying interpersonal skills to theoretical situations. And you have to be able to display an understanding of emotions and different intensities of emotions. So if we take an emotion like happiness or so, then it's not a very intense feeling. But if you use the word overjoyed or ecstatic or words like that, then it's representing a far more intense and stronger reaction. So you have to have a good understanding of that, but for a wider range of different emotions and intensities, but with a more subtle difference between them. You also have to be able to take in a huge amount of information in a very short space of time and then apply that to very specific questions. And you have to be able to infer feelings of characters and infer what they could potentially do next, or what can result as a reaction of those characters' actions. And to do that, you have to be able to empathize with the characters and to see the scenario through their eyes and through their perspective. So why is section 2 necessary for life as a doctor? Interpersonal skills are essential for a doctor. You're dealing with patients day in, day out. So obviously good communication skills are necessary. And you have to be able to understand the feelings of the patients as well as their needs from a non-medical perspective, so not just prescribing medications or surgery or treatment or anything like that. And you have to try and make the patient feel more comfortable and more open when they're speaking to you to get all the information, really. But then you also have to sometimes try and read between the lines and infer the information because the patient may not be explaining everything fully. So you have to be able to speak with patients and without offending them and without making them feel uncomfortable. And again, you have to be able to take in a huge amount of information very quickly and apply it to the situation at hand. So just for example, when you're reading a patient's medical history, then you have to be able to, perhaps manage the treatment differently from the more general methods due to different contraindications or allergies or anything like that. So just for the approach to the section, so you can often get exhausted after section 1. I know I personally did. So what I did, I just closed my eyes and just took a few deep breaths before starting the section, just to sort of reset my mind. And you do kind of need to do that because you do need quite a different mindset for this section. You need quite an emotional and interpersonal mindset. So different strategies work for different people when you're doing it. I personally read the passage first and then went on to the questions just so I could get the full context of what I'm reading. But other people do recommend to read the questions first so you know what to look out for in the passages. But you should just do whatever suits you best, and you'll get that through just doing practice exams and doing questions and everything. So yeah, both are completely fine options. But I would 100% recommend reading the little description at the top of the question, just because that does put a good amount of context into it. So you can get a huge amount of information just from those 2 lines or something at the top. And you can also try and perhaps act as the characters to try and emulate the situations and their feelings. So that may help you to empathize with them, and it can give you a better sense for what those characters are feeling and to be able to put it into words really. So for time management, you can answer the multi-part questions with a smaller passage first, and that can really help you be able to answer more questions in total. As there can be some really long passages and then just one question associated with it. So the best thing is just try and find short passages with a lot of questions with it, because it saves you time on the reading, and then you can answer more questions in that time. Also, there's a question type on cartoons, and they can be really helpful for saving time but only if you're able to answer them quickly. So you should do a good amount of practice on those types of questions beforehand so you can answer them quicker. And probably the main difficulty with section 2 is the vocab. It is extremely difficult, but and sometimes you can see words in the exam that you've never come across. So when you're doing your preparation, make vocab lists with words you don't know and their definitions, as well as some synonyms as well, and that can help you to relate words to others that you do know. Okay. So this is just an emotion intensity wheel. So you can make your own sort of wheel like this, and you can put in your own vocab into it, and then that can that can be a study aid for you. So the way this wheel works is that at the center of the wheel, the words would be far more of an intense emotion, and the further away you get would be a weaker descriptor. So if you look at the left here in the red, so to be annoyed, if you're annoyed at something, it's not a very strong emotion. But if you go closer towards the center, if you're enraged, then it'd be a far more intense emotion. So you can apply your own words to this sort of a wheel. And then also, if you look between the spokes of the different of the wheel, so if you look in the top right in the green, if you're accepting of a situation but somewhat apprehensive or fearful, then you'd be submissive. So you can, again, you can just put in your own words, and you can use those as study aids. So there's 3 main types of questions for section 2. There's doctor-patient interactions, there's passages, and there's cartoons. So doctor-patient interactions are usually just questions where or just scenarios where a doctor and a patient are communicating in a medical context. And it's usually just about the patient having some fears about the surgery or the medication that they're taking, or just discussions about the patient's health and perhaps what they need to do to improve that health. So these questions tend to be a bit shorter than some of the other passage questions. So you can do these types of questions to save you some time, or prioritize these questions to save you some time. So passages, these questions can vary from very short anecdotes to very long conversations. So you can get questions where it's literally just 2 paragraphs, 1 or 2 paragraphs. So it's just a very small amount of information to take in. And then you can get other questions where there's an A4 page and a half or even more of just conversation. So again, I'd recommend going for the shorter paragraphs with the few questions attached to it, just to save you some time. Because I know in my exam, there was one question that was nearly 2 A4 pages, and then there was just one question associated with it. And if you do that first, that can kind of mess you up when you're timing, and can somewhat panic you. So it's probably best to get the multi-part questions done and then just do the other questions towards the end. And cartoons. So these are just pictorial questions, and there's often around 1 or 2 in the exam towards the end. And I found that they're really, really helpful to get your timing back on track. There's not really much to read. But they can be quite challenging and quite misleading. So you have to do some good practice beforehand, just so you're able to answer them quickly and effectively, and actually make use of them. So this is just a practice question for cartoons. So I'll just go through the way I'd go about answering the question. So for these types of questions, because there's not really that much reading to do, I'd tend to look at the questions before I look at the image. But I would recommend, but again, I'd recommend reading the caption there at the start because it really puts it into context. So it's the caption is saying, "Can I have a little extra money this year? I want to get you something really nice for Father's Day." So clearly that this is a daughter speaking to her father. So now essentially we know the scenario, what's going on there. So here's the question that we have. Which of the following best describes the father on hearing this remark? So that means we have to look at the father's facial reactions and his mannerisms to try and get a sense for what he's feeling. So if you look at him, he has quite a straight face. He's not smiling or frowning, so he's not being overly emotional in a way. But he is still staring at her or looking at her. So he is being, he's not being dismissive or anything. He is still paying her, giving her attention. So if you look at option A, grateful though amused, he doesn't look to be grateful because he's not smiling or anything. And I mean, he wouldn't really be grateful because she's asking for more money. And amused, again, he's not smiling. So it wouldn't really be, that wouldn't be the best sort of descriptor. For option B, unimpressed though attentive, that would be quite a good descriptor because he has such a straight face. It's not a very intense emotion. So to be unimpressed would match that. Though attentive, that would also match because he's looking at her. It's not like he's just staring at the book or whatever he's reading in his hand. So that would be quite a good option. But we'll go through with the other options just for completion. So for option C, surprised and doubtful. So surprised, perhaps because his eyebrows perhaps are up a bit, but doubtful, maybe not doubtful because, I mean, perhaps on one aspect, he's doubtful of giving the daughter some money, but it wouldn't be the best sort of word to use to describe the situation. As these two descriptors, unimpressed and attentive, are far better words. And then for option D, distracted and uncertain. So distracted, he wouldn't be distracted because he is looking at her and he's giving her attention. And uncertain, perhaps uncertain about giving her the money, but again, there is better options here. And ultimately, you're looking for the best option because a lot of the time you'll find questions that are or answers that are very similar to each other. So you're looking for the best option out of the four that you're given. And yeah, so option B is the correct answer. So we'll just go through a few extra tips just in your study, just so these are what I kind of did to help me improve. So reading fiction novels can really help. And when you're reading those novels, you can, again, try and emulate the characters and how they're feeling and what they're likely to say next or what they're likely to do next as well. You can try using some speed reading apps to obviously improve your speed reading, because you do have to be able to read a huge amount of content in a very short space of time. Again, practice makes perfect. So yeah, doing as much as you can, but just be careful that if you spend a lot of time on a certain section, then your other sections can drop down. Because for me, I was far better at section 1, naturally. So then I did a lot of work in section 2, but then having done a lot, putting most of my focus on section 2, my section 1 started dropping down a lot. So you have to try and find a bit of a balance between them. And then, group study is very, 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 very helpful. And you can just compare your answers and your explanations. Like even if you get the same answers, just so that you can get the other person's point of view and how they came to that conclusion, because it's such a subjective section. So getting another person's perspective, another person's point of view, can really help you when you're deciding on a different question. You can employ their strategies and how they came about answering that question. Again, your vocab lists, they're essential. And you can go on Instagram to a page called New Yorker Mag for some of the cartoons, and then you can apply some of your own, some of the questions that you've seen, or even just to look at the reactions of the different characters and everything, and to try and just pinpoint some words and relate some words that would be accurate in describing those characters. So yeah, I'll just hand it back to Asad to explain section 3 now.
Yep. Thanks a million, Adil. Hello again, guys. You're already familiar with me. I'm going to be giving the Section 3 guide as well today. Just before we begin, I would like to say as well that in all my practice exams and such, I was actually better at Section 1. However, it was the case that on the exam day, I ended up doing better in Section 3. So that just goes to show you that things can go a bit differently on exam day, and to never doubt your skills in any of your sections. You never know what surprises you have in store on exam day. So just going to be moving on to some general information about Section 3. So it's the nonverbal reasoning. So there's no reading here. It's just shapes and patterns that you have to familiarize yourself with. And there's going to be 30 questions to answer in 40 minutes. So it's a pretty small section, actually. You have 1 minute and 20 seconds on average for each question. I would actually say that's quite generous. Yeah, you're probably going to, if you're 50 years starting off, you're going to see these questions and think, this is taking me like 2 minutes to answer. But for 6 years, I'm sure once you get really familiar with all of your techniques and such, and once you've done a lot of practice, you'd be a lot better at finishing your questions in less than 1 minute and 20 seconds. So I would probably advise finishing Section 3, maybe even under the 40 minutes. I know myself, I finished Section 1 just about on time. Section 2, I was just never good at Section 2, finished that just about on time. And then Section 3, I actually had 5 minutes to spare. And I used those 5 minutes to go over questions that I had marked down as an educated guess. You know, whenever I take an educated guess, I mark the question. And using my spare time, I was able to go back over them. It's pretty good. So I would advise being 100% on top of your time for Section 3. So the exam has 4 main types of questions. You're going to have next in sequence, pick the middle, missing segment, and transformation. And another thing to note is that Section 3 is weighted less than Section 1 and 2. So you can see here it's 40, 40, 20. But despite the fact that Section 3 is weighted less, I wouldn't necessarily say you should study less for it. You know, seeing this, you might think, oh, so I should study twice as much for Section 2 as I do for Section 3. I wouldn't agree with that, because Section 3, I believe, is the most improved using study. So when I started, I knew basically absolutely nothing. And once I studied all my methods and practiced and gave it a good amount of time, I was able to obviously bring my score up more significantly than in the other sections. So a few general strategy and tips for Section 3. Obviously, if you're running out of time, make an educated guess after eliminating a few answers. That's always true. And when you do this, you know, mark it on your page. So if you finish under time, you can go back to your educated guesses and then give a more educated guess or a more correct answer to it. So some questions may take longer than average. For example, pick the middle for me was the bane of my existence. Whenever I had pick the middle questions, I would end up going a bit over the 1 minute and 20 mark. However, I made up for it in next sequence questions because I was quite good at those. So I remember on my exam, I ended up taking like 1 minute 40 probably on average for each pick the middle. But it was okay because once I got to next in sequence, I just got all those done in less than 1 minute and such. So the timings kind of averaged out overall. Always have pen and paper with you when you do practice test questions. So obviously a pen and paper is really helpful for Section 1. Doesn't really do much for Section 2, and it is crucial for Section 3. So whenever you do Section 3, even if you're doing practice questions, not even just for the exam or practice exams, always for practice questions, everything, have your pen and paper, and always practice your ability to, write everything down on the page. And learn your techniques before you do practice questions. I wouldn't necessarily advise this for the other sections. You could probably just jump into Section 1 because you can use your own natural ability to answer those questions. But for this, techniques are like the key point. So you would probably revise your techniques before you start doing all the practicing. And after every practice test, do some practice questions on your worst type. So whenever you do a practice test, obviously you want to always maintain everything at a good standard. Don't let one aspect of the section like slip away. Like I know sometimes I had my missing segment just slip down in one practice exam. So I went back and I did most of my missing segment practice questions before doing the next practice exam. And then I was able to bring everything up to par. So simple patterns are more likely to be correct than complicated patterns. Basically, if you have 2 patterns that you figured out, like, it could be the case that this shape is moving 1 corner, 2 corners, 3 corners, then 4 corners, or it could be the case that the shape is moving 1 corner at a time. I would probably go for the 1 corner at a time, because if they both work, then you're going to want to use the more simple pattern in any situation where that happens. And before we move on, I'd just like to give a few personal exam tips. So Section 3 is the final section on your exam. And when you come to it, you're going to be like extremely lethargic. You're probably going to be worried like, I think I did really badly in Section 2 or Section 1. And I'm worried like my exam's basically a fail at this point. I think you should look at Section 3 as an opportunity to save your exam instead. That's what I did. I just thought, okay, section 1 and 2 are completely over. I don't need to think about all of that vocab anymore that I learned for section 2. Don't need to think about any of my strategies for section 1. I'm just going to 100% focus on my techniques for section 3, do the best I can, and not let all of the lethargy from doing the whole exam before catch up to me. I'd also say bring multiple pencils, a sharpener, and a razor to help you make diagrams, because on the day of your exam, you don't want to be like breaking your pencil and then thinking, well, that was the one pencil I brought, now what do I do? Because you don't want to be stuck in a situation like that. It can also bring you a bit of confidence. I know myself, I brought in like I had like 6 pencils and like a sharpener, a razor, like all this stuff. I came in very well prepared, and it helped me get a bit of confidence. And it's all about confidence really with the Hpat. As I said before, aim to finish section 3 under the 40-minute time limit. Extremely beneficial for that. And just a general tip as well, I would probably eat a breakfast bar before you do the exam, because it's a very long exam. You're going to be using a lot of glucose from having your brain like fried by all the questions. So be really high on your sugar levels. Use it over for exam day and stay hydrated. I believe your exam is probably going to be online, so you won't have the issue of waiting for the toilet, because there was a line, I remember, in my exam center. And staying hydrated, you can even see myself drinking water constantly, because it is important to keep your mind fresh throughout the exam. So always have your water bottle with you. I think you should also rip off the label or something. I'm sure there are some rules that you'd have to look up first. Anyways, mainly for the 5th year students here who may not be familiar with the questions, next in sequence, this is just a layout. So you're just going to have a sequence like this, where you have 4 components, and then you're going to have to choose out of A, B, C, D, and E, which one is going to go into this missing slot. So I think everyone should be able to figure out that E comes next, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, super simple logical sequence. And that's the way you'd go about doing it. And pick the middle. You're going to have a randomly ordered assortment of 5 options. And then you need to figure out what the actual order is. And you need to pick what would come in the middle of the actual order. So in this situation, we've got like 2, 8, 10, 6, 4. This is just all over the place, completely random. But when you see the 2 and the 4, you're like, so it could be going to 2 to 4. You're just adding 2 to get to 6, adding 2 to get to 8, adding 2 to get to 10. And it's just 2 for 6, 8, 10, very simple sequence. And the center of that is 6. So D would be the correct answer in this pick the middle question. And missing segment. The missing segment can have multiple things. It could be a matrix. I think they're quite common. Matrix is just like a grid like this, and you can have a pattern either going like vertically, horizontally, or even just like a pattern between like the 2 outer the outer components and the center component. Like in this situation, there's actually multiple patterns going on, but I guess a very simple one you could see is that you're doubling the number as you go down. So 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4. And then you got the 3, 6, 12. So over here you'd have 2 by 2 is 4, 4 by 2, 8. So the answer would be B for this one. And then another thing you can get is transformation questions. So these are a type of missing segment question, but they're a bit less common, which I think is a bit of a shame, because I found transformation question quite easy. You just have to look at the original image. There'd be a transformation image, an altered image. You basically just need to figure out what the transformation image is doing to cause this change. Okay, so I'm just going to move on to an example of a pick the middle question. This pick the middle question, I'm giving it because I want to explain a technique just really quickly. It was a very useful technique called mapping. So what you do in mapping is that you have to pay attention to the background shape. So the background shape in all of these is a hexagon. So on your page, you would draw in pencil a hexagon. And then you have to pay attention to 2 components. 2 components are a black square and a white star. So as you can see here, you just have to note where was the black square in each of the options. So you would do that here. You can see like A and C was in the top left corner, B was over here, D and E was here. Let's move back so you can see that. So you can see A is here, B here, C here, D here, E here. You do the exact same thing for your white star as well. And once you've done that, it might be a bit easier for you to figure out a bit of a sequence that's going on here. So I would probably look at the white star first, and I could probably see, oh, it's pretty obvious it could be going A to D to B to C to E, because that's just moving 1 corner at a time. And then I'd have to see, does that work for the black square as well? So you have to check 1 component at a time. So I went from A to D for the star. How does that work with the square? It would just go 2 sides. Then you went to B, 2 sides again. Then I went to C, 2 sides again, and then E, 2 sides again. So you can just see it's moving 2 sides anti-clockwise each time here. and this would just be going one corner anti-clockwise each time. So in that way, mapping has made the pick the middle question very easy, and you were able to get the answer from it. Yep, so the answer was B. And then I'm just going to give a brief little next in sequence question. This next in sequence question is a number pattern. So when you get questions that are number patterns, you should make a table. These tables will make solving it very easy. It'll make all of your information laid out there for you to see. So you just draw your table in with pencil on the paper. So in this situation, the pattern is between the number of sides of each shape. So you can see here the inner shape had 5 sides. We wrote that down, and we wrote down that the outer shape had 4 sides. And we did the same for each option. And then we can see all the information laid out here. And then you would be looking, oh, is there a sequence going on with the inner shape's sides? So it went from 5 to 3 to 7 to 4. So that would be like -2 plus 4 minus 3. There is a bit of a sequence going on there, but it's not very, it doesn't really make that much sense. And if we apply the same thing here for the outer shapes, you're adding 1, taking away 1, then adding 4, it's basically no sequence there. So in these situations, always look for a difference between the shape sides as well. That's another thing to look out for. And we do that. You would see 1, there's a difference of 2, difference of 3, difference of 4. So now we're starting to see a sequence there. And once we figured out that sequence, we can actually start eliminating a few answers, because when you see the difference in the sides of the answers here, right? You have A, which has an outer shape with 5 sides and the inner shape with 10 sides. So that's a difference of 5, which we would expect because the difference went from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. So we're expecting a difference of 5 now. And so we have A has a difference of 5. B has a difference of 3. This has a difference of 4. The D has a difference of 5. So that's also in the running for a potential answer. And then E has a distance of 4 as well, I believe. So that's not in the running for an answer. So once you've done that, you just cross out B, C, and E. And if you're really, really pressed for time, you could just say, oh, I'm just going to randomly guess A or randomly guess D. You have a 50-50 chance. It's a lot better than the 20% chance you originally had. But if you just take a little bit more time, you can figure out that the outer shape had less sides in the first step of the sequence. Then the outer shape had more. Then it had less. Then it had more. So now it's going to have less. So using that, we know that A has an outer shape with less sides. So the answer would be A. Yep. So that is the end of my speech on section 3. I hope you all found it informative. I'm just going to stop my screen share and we'll move on with improving the Hpat. So over to you, Azim.
Thank you very much for that, Sad. So now we're going to be moving on to the 6th-year section of the webinar. Yeah, we're going to be having a few talks now. This will be far more exam focused from now on. So it'll be we'll be having a talk on improving your Hpat, a talk on the day of the exam. We'll be having some brief tips for the exam day from each of the sections. Then a talk on some alternate routes to medicine. And then we'll have a Q&A session for however long however long is necessary. And then we'll just wrap it up there with a conclusion there. And we'll just ask you to please fill out an anonymous feedback form after that. So I'd like to just pass it on to Azim. So he'll be moderating the next talk, which is improving your Hpat. Thank you.
Thank you, Adil. So this is going to be a video presented by Ahmad Mirza. He's currently a 4th-year medical student. This video was recorded the last time we held this event, which was for the exam last year. He couldn't join us today, so we're going to play a video and he's going to talk about how to study for and improve your Hpat. So what you're doing every week, how you're going to use that to improve your score. So this will be useful for both 6th years and 5th years.
So just to introduce myself, anyways, my name's Ahmad Mirza. I'm the kind of the voice you're always hearing in the little intermissions. I am a third year medical student in Trinity College, Dublin. And so I labeled this slide, this topic as 55th to 95th, because it talks about how I went from 55th percentile in my first Hpat attempt to 95th. So as you can see there, it's quite a substantial sort of jump or leap from year to year. And my aim in the next sort of 10 minutes is going to be how I went about increasing, what did I do to go from 55th to 95th? Okay, so the first thing to notice here is that the HPAT itself is not a memory-based exam. It's a skill-based exam. It's unlike anything, like you've heard it multiple times already today. You'll hear it again. It's unlike any other exam you'll ever do. It's completely different to what you're going to be doing for your Leaving Cert exams. No amount of memorization or sort of just kind of rote learning is going to help you for the exam. So what will help you in the exam? The HPAT is all about improving the skills necessary on a consistent basis over 5, maybe even 4 or 5 months. That's the real sort of end of the game. When my first attempt, I sort of went into I'm going to work as hard as possible sort of mentality, but for a very short period of time. So over Christmas, I had done sort of 10 exams. Almost 10 exams in like 15, 20 days. So obviously like a huge volume and a huge work rate, but again, it really doesn't mean anything because you're not going to improve your skill set in that period of time. So what skills are necessary? So of course we've heard about speed reading and we've heard about quick maths there. On the right hand side, you can see so those two skills are extremely important, as you can imagine, because everything is going to be sort of on that paper. There'll be no calculators and stuff like that. But apart from speed reading, what's really important, I found anyways, was concentration. So how are you able to read, your ability to read a piece of text and sort of memorize it and keep it in your head for that 45 to 1 minute time frame. So just think about yourself, like your own concentration sort of levels, how that has been, how that is yourself. So think about like how impatient you are when you're flicking through your Instagram Explorer page, or when you're watching TV that you're constantly on your phone as well. So if you think about that and then go and think about in the HVAC exam, you're going to have to spend 2.5 hours completely solely focused on one thing, and that's it. So it's really important to sort of build up that concentration level and your ability to just focus on one thing. So one of the techniques I used was to find a sort of journal article or a news article somewhere similar to this that's quite text heavy, and sort of had talked about stuff that is you wouldn't probably know about in school. And then I'd read the text and then read the text as with extreme concentration and obviously using skimming and whatnot. And then after that, then sort of summarizing it in my own words after about 10 seconds. So reading through this, the results page here, or maybe like the sort of conclusions. And then after reading that, be like, okay, so essentially this is all about here. So when in the actual exam, when you read your passage, you'll be able to go into your question stems and know exactly what's going on. So yeah, so concentration, building up the concentration, reading a lot is really important, as well as the quick maths. Okay, so timing is, as you've heard numerous occasions already today, timing is incredibly important. I take the HPAT as sort of a game of odds. The more questions you attempt, the better chance you have of getting more questions correct. That's as simple as that. So you should always aim to complete the paper. Obviously, a lot of people find it difficult, myself included. I find it very, very difficult to finish section 1 and sometimes section 3 as well. So use that sort of, just keep that in mind. So one of the tips, so as Azam said, he said that you were able to bring in an analog watch. That's going to be extremely important for you. You need to make sure that you have one that it's functioning the night before and the day of. So one of the things I said, a little tip that I have for you guys is that when you're in the exam is to make sure before you start section 1 that you set it to 12 o'clock. That just enables you to just quickly see how long you're going. You're not looking at counting. Even if you're started at like 10 past, you're not trying to calculate or remember what time you started at. So make sure you start off at 12 o'clock. After you finish section 1, then bring it back again to 12 o'clock for section 2. So that then again, you'll be sort of back on track and it'll be easier to monitor the time. I remember my own HPAT, I didn't bring back the time, and I was in my first HPAT in section 2. I was like, I don't know what time I started section 2 at. I was like very flustered, and then that just builds up your stress, builds up you're concentrating on time rather than like being really good quality. So it's really important to make sure you reset the watch. And then when you're doing your practice exams, make sure that you're sticking to the time as quickly as possible. It's really important that you understand the importance of practicing your HPAT exams in the time frame. Start them at the time you would usually do your HPAT exam at. Make sure that you're not sort of going over the time, just giving yourself a minute here, because you won't get that time in the actual exam. And when you're doing the exam, your practice exam, don't guess. Obviously in the actual HPAT, if you run out of time, you're going to guess the rest of them. But in the practice exams, don't do that, because it'll give you an accurate, it'll show you how many questions you're able to do in the time allocated. And then the final thing with the timing is use the amount of questions you've completed as a sort of gauge to see how you're improving. So if you go from week 1, you're able to do 25 questions in section 1, and then week 7 or 8, you're able to do 40 questions. That's obviously a dramatic improvement, and that's good, and that'll sort of boost your confidence. Yeah. So next of all, we're going to talk about strengths and weaknesses. So obviously, when we talk about strengths and weaknesses, we always say play to your strengths, and improve your weaknesses. Oftentimes when people like you guys that are listening to here, that you're extremely high achieving students, you are always doing the best you can probably do and possibly do. You always want to make sure you're not bad at anything. I remember feeling that you're quite competitive with yourself and with other things, but it's really important to first. It's obviously really important to improve the weaknesses, but also don't lose track of your strengths and make sure you play to your strengths on the HPAT day. So you obviously, when you do your practice exams, you'll know what are your strong suits. So for me, I did not like problem solving, but I loved logical reasoning. But I liked logical reasoning. So just when I was doing the HPAT, I would look for the logical reasoning questions and make sure I did those first before spending an exorbitant amount of time on the problem solving questions. And also in the HPAT, you get a little 30-second window before you actually start the exam, or 30 to a minute window, where you're able to check your answer booklet or your sort of the question booklet for any imperfections or inaccuracies. So you use that time to look for the questions you're good at. So if you're good at logical reasoning, look for the ones about logical reasons. If you're good at pick the middle, look for the stems. Oh, pick the middles from like 105 to 110. So make sure you do those first. And also understand that you do the questions with the most amount of questions in those sort of little units. So if you see a question that has one passage but 5 questions, and you have see one passage with 2 questions, make sure you do the one with the 5 first, because more bang for your buck. So yeah, make sure you improve your weaknesses, but make sure you play to your strengths. And finally, the mental preparation. As Saad mentioned in the very beginning, mental preparation is incredibly important. So as you can imagine, you're going to be stressed. It's just inevitable. And to shy away from that and to think that you're not going to be stressed is naive and sort of is not the right way to go about it. So the best thing you can do is first accept you're going to be stressed, and then find ways to manage it. So one of the ways you can manage it is by journaling here. So writing down reasons why you're going to do well in the HPAT, or how you've improved. So your first journal entry for tonight could even be that on August, at the end of August, I sat through a full HPAT seminar, which many of my peers have not done. So that's something to add into your journal. So make sure you're constantly giving yourself reasons why you can manage your stress and why you are in a good position. Also mindset. So changing your mindset. It's all well and good to say be positive about it, but it's tough sometimes to be positive about something when it's draining and stuff like that. So try a little mindset shift. So instead of thinking of it as a task to do, think of it as a stepping stone towards your goal of being a doctor. So make sure you're constantly keeping your mindset in check, and improving that also. And then also another thing that you can also do is that motivation sometimes is hard to rely on. It's hard to rely on your own willingness and motivation to do something, but habit is much easier to number one to start and to sort of keep it going. So get into the habit of doing your practice exams on every Saturday at 12 o'clock, to every Monday, Wednesday, whatever, Thursday that you do your drills, Sundays you go over it. So just get into your habit and just think of it, this is what happened. This is what I do on a Saturday, and that'll help you go through. And then the final thing there is HVAC friends. So find people that are doing the HVAC. If you're in a school that medicine people aren't applying for a HVAC, find friends outside of school that are doing HVAC. Look, you have a perfect opportunity here that you have a perfect opportunity here to sort of say hello to people and just be like, I'm doing the HVAC, don't have anybody to talk to about it. Like, nice to meet you, whatever. Like, just to sort of network and find people that are in a similar position to you, and you'll be able to sort of bounce ideas off and tell them if you're feeling down about one day, and the one person can help bring you up. So it's really important to be friends with people that are very like-minded. Okay, perfect. So that's really that's my part. And I hope you took a lot from that. And here's just a summary. So skills-based, the timing aspect, strengths and weaknesses. Make sure you're doing your practice exams in the most optimal way, and the mental preparation, managing that S word and accepting it, and finding ways to sort of get away from that.
Okay, so I hope you found that useful or helpful. The next video I'm going to play is from the same event. It's presented by me. My name is Ahzam Arain. I'm a second-year medical student in UCD, and I'm going to be talking about what to do on the day of the exam, the morning, and the days leading up, because it's important to get into a good mindset so that you're in your best mental condition to take on the exam. Thanks, Ahmad. Hi, my name is Ahzam. I took the Hpat for the first time this year and got 97th percentile, which I was very happy with. I'm going to be talking today about how to study for the Hpat and how to improve in it, and then what to do in the last days before the exam. So the Hpat is like a skill, which means you can't cram it. It's something you need dedication and practice over time to improve. Now, today you've learned a few strategies on how to tackle questions, and you should keep doing that. But the main way to improve is to do practice exams. So most people do these every weekend or every second week. And what you want to do is, when you finish the exam, the next day or later in the week, go through your answers, because that's where you get the real learning. You learn from your mistakes in the Hpat. So when you finish your exam, you go back and check what you got wrong, and you can look at the worked solutions if you have them, and you'll see the correct solution on how to tackle the question. So that next time, if a similar question comes up, you'll know how to take it on and how to get it right. Now, for the first one or two exams, you can do it. You can take as much time as you want, do it in your own conditions. Try to just get the gist of how it's like. But then after a couple of exams, you want to try to start emulating exam conditions so that when the real day comes, there's nothing that you aren't used to, nothing out of the ordinary for you. So what I mean by this is, first of all, timed conditions. I'd recommend buying an analog wristwatch, not a digital one. It has to be analog, because they allow you to bring one into the exam hall and use that to time yourself on each section. And do it under time conditions, and be very strict with this. So once time is up, just stop doing the section, drop everything, and move on to the next one. This is because the exam is very time pressured, as everyone's told you already, and it's extremely important to be on time. And the best way to do this is to just practice being quick. The other main thing is using an answer sheet. So you can find it online and print it off and just fill in the small answers. The reason for this is because this will take a few minutes, because there's so many questions in the whole exam, and you want to get used to using it so that, again, nothing's out of the ordinary on exam day and you feel very comfortable doing the exam. And then if you're doing your exams and looking over them during the week, you can do during the weekend, you can do extra questions during the week, or you can look at areas you're weak on and look at strategies for improving them. Now, in the last week before the exam, you want to reduce your Hpat work to a minimum. You don't want to overload yourself, and you don't want to burn out on Hpat work before the Hpat, because you want to peak on the day of the exam. So if you want, you can look over your notes, look over past questions you've done, but definitely don't do a full exam on the last week. You should also get into good sleep routine. So especially if you have a midterm break the week before the exam, you don't want to be waking up late and sleeping late. You want to be getting up early and regularly, so that, again, you're not tired on the day, because the last thing you need is to be short on sleep and not focusing properly. And if possible, you should drive or take the bus to the exam center and check it out and become familiar with it, so that you're not running around looking for it on the day and getting late. Now, obviously, this year it's online, so that last point isn't really applicable. But if anyone's taking the exam next year, then we don't know how it's going to be yet. And every other point here is still applicable, even if it's online. On the last night before the exam, you make sure you have a positive mindset. Don't doubt your abilities. Remember, many people are going into this thinking that it's an aptitude test that you can't prepare for or improve at all. So you're already ahead of those people. If you've been working for the months leading up and constantly improving, then you're already in the top quarter of people. A mindset and be positive. Picture yourself doing well in the exam, so that because if you have a negative mindset and you're doubting yourself, you're going to start being stressed, and then you're not going to function as best as possible. It might sound counterintuitive, but don't do anything Hpat related. Again, you want to clear your mind, maybe go for a walk or something, but don't start stressing yourself with Hpat work on the night before. The only thing you should really do is prepare your stuff for the next day. So bring an analog wristwatch. Like I said earlier, they won't allow a digital one, and the clocks in the exam center might not be working properly, or they might be obscured. So bring your own wristwatch. Bring at least 3 pencils with an eraser and a sharpener, water, a snack, and photo ID and admission. You need the last two to enter the exam hall on the day. And of course, if you're in a good sleep routine, the last one will be easy enough, but you want to get to bed early so you're well rested on the morning and you have a clear head. And finally, when the big day comes, you want to get a healthy breakfast in the morning. You want to ideally have a good amount of carbs. The reason for this is because, first of all, you want to get to the exam center at least half an hour early, just in case of traffic delays and things like that. And the other thing is the actual registration process can take a while. The exam takes a while, and then they'll take a while to hand out the papers beforehand and collect them at the end. There might be other delays as well. I remember in my exam, there was a 20-minute delay from when we were supposed to start. So you will be there for at least 3 to 4 hours, maybe more. So to prevent yourself getting hungry, you want to have a good breakfast. And like I said before, maybe bring a snack if you get hungry before the exam starts. On the morning, you want to create your own bubble and focus on yourself. Don't talk to other people because it'll just increase your stress. Keep that positive mindset from the night before and just focus on yourself doing well. Don't talk to other people at all, and stay focusing on yourself. And during the exam, remember, don't dwell on questions for extended periods of time. You'll see things that you didn't expect or you're not prepared for, but other people will feel the same way. And as I've said before, and as other people have said, time is very important in this exam. So just make an educated guess and move on. The most important thing is to get every question done with an educated guess, or if you know it's right, that's great. But the last thing you want is to be missing out questions at the end because you don't have time to answer. Thank you for listening. Now I'll pass it back to him.
Is going to take you through that.
So now I'm going to pass it back to Adil. He's going to take you through a few tips on each section that you can use on the exam day itself.
Thank you very much, Azam, for that. So we'll now just move on to some tips for the individual sections, just dealing with how to approach each section and what to do during the exam to save you some time and to get through it easier ultimately. Okay, so just for we'll start with section 1. So here are the main tips that we have. So as you know, timing is essential as you obviously want to get as many questions done as possible. So you have to know where you can gain some time and where you can afford to spend longer on. Problem solving and research method questions can often take really long to answer. So logical reasoning and data interpretation questions can be done a lot quicker. So if you want to potentially even search out for those questions first and just get them done, just so you have some more time to spend on the other questions and you're not struggling to just cram them in at the very end. So you can answer the questions that you're perhaps more comfortable with, or you can get done faster. And you can also again answer the multi-part questions with the short stimulus. And because that's, at the very start when you're given that brace period or a few minutes or so, what I did in my exam, I just looked out for those specific questions, just marked them down, and then straight away went for those questions. Just got all those big kind of 5 question ones, got them done straight away. So yeah, that really helped me to on my timing. So staying on pace for the day of the exam, using a checkpoint system for the Hpat, that's definitely very, very effective. So for section 1, you're aiming to get about 11 questions done every 15 minutes, which is far easier than getting like one question done every 90 seconds is far easier to keep track of, I found anyway. And yeah, it also means you can be looking at your watch less frequently, which is definitely very important. To improve your section 1 speed, your section 1 is, I mean, it is extremely difficult on timing, but like to kind of get more questions done properly in the time limit, you have to be able to know when to let questions go, like when you're not able to fully solve them or get them right or anything. So, I mean, you could be spending like 5 or 10 minutes on like one single question and still not get the right answer. So sometimes you just have to eliminate as many wrong answers as you can and then just put down like your best guess. Because, I mean, the best scenario is like you just increase your chances of getting the question right for a guess, and it's better than just blindly guessing. So yeah, you can just do that. But like, yeah, that just comes with practice. So just keep trying it in your practice exams and try and get as many questions done within the time limit, and try and like, perhaps even just noting down how many questions you get done in each practice exam. And then you can just keep track of that. And then that may help you to sort of improve over time. Practice environment, like this is more about how correcting your practice exams is essential, and that knowing why and where you went wrong is really, really beneficial for helping you improve. You can also see like other methods for how to approach certain questions, and like in the worked examples, because they have sort of a breakdown of how to come to certain conclusions and stuff. So you can take those methods and then apply that to your own sort of exams, and that can really speed up your time, because a lot of the time, like, I mean, those worked examples are done by the people that or essentially by the people that make the exam. So yeah, they're definitely very helpful to look at. Okay, in section 1, you don't have to read the passages as comprehensively as in section 2 to get full context. So you can definitely afford to just skim read and pick out the important facts rather than reading the entire passage, because you don't need as much context. You obviously do need some context, but you don't need as much. So yeah, skim reading and picking out the important facts. So using the space that you have. So because you're doing the exam online this year or at home, so yeah, make sure your desk is clear of everything apart from obviously the most important things. So yeah, so just make sure you have everything you need. There is certain requirements or certain limitations for what you can have, but try and maximize those. So if you can have as many pens or pencils and paper as with you for your rough work, and write it as big as you need to. So don't worry about saving space if you can. And yeah, working on your mental maths. Mental maths is really, really helpful for saving you some time during the exam. So being able to just do like a lot of the basic calculations, or even just like being able to do larger calculations on paper, because obviously you don't have a calculator, or even just knowing how to round and estimate, and to like be able to do that in your head, like that can really save you a lot of time there. Okay, it's just for section 2. We'll just talk about the approach again. So yeah, you can definitely get exhausted. So yeah, what I did, I closed my eyes and just took a deep breath before I started section 2. And of course, yeah, different strategies work for different people. So do whatever suits you best. You'll find out that when you're doing your practice exams and doing your practice questions. So try different strategies, try different ways, and then whatever you feel most comfortable with, and whatever you're doing best with, stick with that. And don't try and change anything during the exams. Do everything kind of with the same environment or same mindset going into all your practice exams. And then, yeah, same again, read the description at the very start of the passage to put the full passage into context, like regardless of which strategy you're using. And then again, you can pretend to be you can emulate being the characters and emulate their feelings and somewhat act as them, and that can help you put into words. So yeah, just on some tips. So time management, answer same as section 1, answer the multi-part question with a small passage first. And yeah, the stems can be very long in the exam, and I found them to be really long in the actual exam. And you also kind of have to factor in that when you're doing the exam, there may be sort of an initial shock stage, or an initial panic stage, perhaps. Just so like for a minute or so, you won't be going through things as fast because you're somewhat nervous. So giving yourself a bit of leeway for that definitely can really help you. Yeah, and same again, being good with or doing good practice on cartoons beforehand, just to maximize their time-saving properties. That can be very beneficial. And having good vocab lists with all your definitions and synonyms, and perhaps making the emotion intensity wheels. And that's again, it can really save you some time. So perhaps you don't even have to do like some of the elimination process. So if you don't recognize the word, you can just try and find out the answer through elimination. But if you do recognize a word, perhaps you may not even have to do that elimination if you find the word straight away, if you know the word. So just some tips. It's probably not as beneficial, but for 2 weeks before the exam. But you can read fiction novels and guess their characters' emotions and how they're feeling, what you'd expect them to do next, their reactions, facial expressions, perhaps, those sorts of things. Speed reading practice. Of course, practice makes perfect. So doing as much practice as you can. But obviously, in the last week, taking a little bit easier just to give yourself a bit of a break so that you're not burnt out. And then, your group work, your group work with whoever, your friends, family, or anybody that you know who's done it or is doing it, just to get a bit of different perspectives and different things. Your vocab lists, and New Yorker Mag on Instagram for the different cartoons, and you can apply your own questions, or even just look at those characters, the facial reactions or facial expressions, those sorts of things. So on to section 3. If you're running out of time, make an educated guess after eliminating a few answers. Same approach with all the other sections. Some questions may take longer than average. Pick the middle questions can be extremely tedious. So just working on them beforehand, doing your drills, doing a lot of practice on them, just to get, just to be able to speed up your how you answer those questions. And then sometimes if you feel like you're running out of time, just kind of knowing your certain techniques to give you a good guess. So a lot of the time where it's you can get 3-2 and those they're different sort of ones, and sometimes it can just be literally the odd one out. You could just be picking that one, but kind of having good strategies for your estimation or your good guesses, that can really help you when you're running out of time. But obviously that's the last resort. You don't want to be relying on that. You should be doing more practice on your weakest question types, especially for section 3, just so you can really improve that and speed up your time. Again, having your pencil and paper with you when you're doing your practice tests, and also for your actual exam, make sure you have all of them ready right beside you. Make sure you're not searching for anything. You have everything ready with you, and with your multiple pencils, your sharpener, rubbers, everything, all you need. And when make sure you know all the techniques for section 3, and make sure and try not to guess things or guess different techniques in section 3. Make sure you know everything you're doing beforehand. And simple patterns are more likely to be correct than complicated patterns. So if you see 2 patterns that are there or that are possible, go with the simple option, because they tend to be the correct ones, or the ones that they're looking for. So go for those ones. And so I think a lot of the speakers today we'd all agree that a lot of time the section that you're best at in practice may not actually be the best section when you're doing your exam. So you don't worry if, let's say, your best section is section 1, but you felt like it didn't go as well. Just move on, just accept it, and just go in with a clear mindset, clear head for the next sections, because you can make up a lot of marks in the other sections, and perhaps it's not even as bad as you think. It may even be better than you think. Doing that sort of thing, just be kind of going in with a clear mindset for each individual section is definitely very, very helpful. I'd also advise, keep finishing your section 3 in your 40-minute, under your 40-minute time limit in your practice exams, and obviously in the Hpat exam as well. Just to I'll give you a bit of a leeway when you're going into the exam, so then you have some time to look over, and so you can get over that initial panic stage when you're just looking through things. Give yourself a bit of a chance. And section 3 tends to be the easiest to improve because it's more technique based. So so make sure you know all your techniques. Make sure you know the different sort of more common patterns, those sorts of things, and it can really help you. And group study, again, it's the same with sort of all the sections, getting other people's perspectives of how they come up with conclusions. It's really, really, really helpful. So doing that as much as you can. There's not as much time left now, but for the 5th years, definitely I'd recommend trying to do that with whoever you know, and making friends to try and do that. It's very, very helpful. Okay, so that's what I have for today. So I'll just pass it back to Asim to moderate the next talk, which is alternate routes to medicine. Thank you.
Thank you, Adil. Yeah, so this is going to be the last video we play today for you. It's also from the same presentation we gave. It's presented by Ramin Khalid. She's currently a 2nd-year medical student in RCSI, and she'll talk about some alternate routes to medicine. So if you're applying next year for medicine, whether you're 5th year or 4th year, or you're somebody who is unfortunate and doesn't get it this year but would still like to try, there's plenty of ways other than the main way. And many people even get medicine their 2nd or 3rd time of trying, so there's no need to be discouraged if you don't get it straight away.
Hi everyone, my name is Ramin and I'm going to be giving a short talk on alternate routes into medicine. So as you all know, medicine is a really competitive course and many people don't actually get in on their first attempt. So it's really important to have some backup options, and I'm going to go through some of these backup options for you all now. Oops. So the first and most obvious option is repeating. You can either repeat the Hpat on its own, or you can repeat the Leaving Cert and the Hpat. So how do you know which route to take? I'm going to explain that for you now. So the first scenario you could find yourself in is that you got a high Leaving Cert score but a low Hpat score. So a high Leaving Cert score will be about 550 points or above. So the first option you have here is to take a gap year and repeat the Hpat. So this will give you the chance to study for the Hpat without the pressure of the Leaving Cert, and a gap year can also be a great opportunity to engage in other activities such as paid work, travel, or volunteering. And the second option you have is to start a different degree and repeat the Hpat while you're in your 1st year of college. So if you do decide to go down this route, it is important to choose a course that you will enjoy rather than a course that you think will help you get into medicine. That way, if you don't get in the 2nd time, you have something to fall back on and it won't be a wasted year. Also, it is important to note that if you miss out Also, it is important to note that if you do get in after completing 1st year of another degree, you will be liable to pay tuition fees for your 1st year of medicine. So that's just something to keep in mind. And the second scenario when it comes to repeating is that you got low points in your Leaving Cert. In this case, you have to repeat both the Leaving Cert and the Hpat. You can't repeat the Leaving Cert on its own because Hpat scores are valid for 1 year only. So you can repeat at your old school if they can accommodate you, or grind school, or even from home if you're highly motivated. The important thing to note here is that some people think that you can drop English, Irish, or maths when you repeat, but this is not the case for medicine. You have to meet all your minimum entry requirements in one sitting, and you can't drop any of your core subjects, even if you pass them the 1st time, but you can drop to ordinary level in these subjects if you wish, in order to decrease your workload. So the next route is studying medicine overseas. The most popular choice would probably be the UK. So you have to apply through UCAS, which is basically the British version of the CAO. And additionally, you will need to sit either the UCAT or the BMAT, depending on which universities you are applying to. These are both entrance exams similar to the Hpat. And you may also have to do interviews for the universities which accept your application. And the application deadline is the 15th of October 2020 for 2021 entry. So if you're going into 6th year, you need to look at this as soon as possible.
If anyone's interested in this, and it is a very good option, but if anyone's interested for this year, it's too late to apply for 2022. But if you're looking at applying for 2023, the deadline will once again be the 15th of October this year, 2022.
So apart from the UK, there are many other universities in Europe which offer undergraduate degrees taught through English. So these medical degrees often have lower fees and entry requirements than Irish universities. and they're recognised by the Irish Medical Council. The most popular countries would be Poland, Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Romania, and Slovakia. And for most universities, you will be required to sit an entrance test or do an interview. For exact entry requirements and deadlines for individual universities, a good website to check out is unicast.ie. It has all the information that you need. Sorry. So lastly, I want to touch on graduate entry medicine. It is a 4-year accelerated course for anyone who already has an undergraduate degree. Your undergrad degree doesn't have to be science or healthcare related. It can be in any discipline, but you must get a 2-1 or higher. And you must also sit a test called the GAMSAT. It's an entrance exam similar to the Hpat in that it tests your logical reasoning skills, but it also has extra knowledge-based and essay writing components. The schools in Ireland which offer graduate entry medicine are University College Dublin, the Royal College of Surgeons, University of Limerick, and University College Cork. And of course, many universities in the UK also offer graduate entry medicine. So it is important to note that graduate entry medicine is more expensive than the other routes I have mentioned. Your undergraduate degree is covered by the free fee scheme, meaning that the government pays your tuition for you. But when it comes to graduate entry medicine, you have to pay your fees yourself, so it can be quite expensive. But it is still a good backup option to have for those who can't get in through the undergraduate route. So I suppose the main thing I want you all to take away from this presentation is how important it is to have backup options when applying for medicine. Even if you do not get into medicine the first time, it's not the end of the world. There are always other options available to you. One bad result in your Leaving Cert or Hpat does not define your future career. Sometimes you need to take a different route in order to achieve your goals, and that's totally okay. So if it's meant to be, you will be a doctor someday. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you all found my talk to be useful.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to the last main part of this, which is the Q&A. So I'm going to pass it on to Saad Hussain now to host that.
Okay, hello everyone. So my name is Saad, and I'm going to be hosting this Q&A session. So firstly, I'd like to thank all the presenters, Adil, Saad, and Azam, as well as Dr. Khan and everyone on the Hpat committee for making this event possible. So if you have any questions, just submit it in the chat box and we'll get to it there. And you can also see on the slide there that we have the different social medias and stuff, so you can follow us there as well. Okay, so the first question, thank you, Emmet, for your question. You said in section 1, ACER practice exams, the passages are very short. Is this the same as in the actual Hpat? And if it's different, how different is it? So I guess it depends on the exams. Some of them are quite short, some of them are quite long. Again, it also depends as if it's a problem-solving question or it's a logical reasoning question. So usually the problem-solving questions are a bit longer. They'll have diagrams, tables, stuff like that. What I'd recommend for you is to check out ACER Practice Test 4. From feedback, I've found that that is the most accurate to what they actually do on the actual day. But again, they always change it. Every year they like to change it a little bit. They like to make it a little bit shorter, a little bit longer. So I wouldn't worry too much about the length, but I would make sure that your timing's on point. And yeah, so your timing's on point. And you've probably seen from the other talks already that as long as your timing's on point, you shouldn't worry about it too much. And always use the techniques that we described. So we talk about skimming, we talk about, reading fast, not spending too much time, not dwelling on the small details, because you have to remember that you don't need to know what's going on in the text. You just need to read it, extract the key information, and then pick your answer based on that. Okay, so the second question is from Abdullah. So he said some of the ACER practice tests do not have worked solutions. Do you recommend any other sources for practice questions? So at this point, I would recommend, obviously the gold standard is the Hpat questions on the ACER website. And I do know that some of them don't have the worked out answers. I know that MedEntry is a good option that many people use. It has a very large question bank and an array of different questions. And they also have the worked solutions for the ACER questions. So you can definitely have a look at that there. Apart from that, I would kind of just focus on those two. And the main thing is try and do as many questions as you can and making sure that you understand why you went wrong. So, okay, so while we're waiting on more people to ask any questions, again, I would recommend any of you guys to ask any question at all, especially the 6th years, because I know you guys have your exams in 2.5 weeks. So this is your opportunity to ask any question at all. There's no such thing as a stupid question, but I will go through some frequently asked questions. So the first question will probably be, what to bring on test day. So this also pertains to the fact that you guys have your exam online. So for your exam, you're going to need a computer or laptop. You're going to need a stable internet connection. You can either have a small erasable whiteboard and pen, or 2 pieces of A4 sized scratch paper. And you can also have like a pencil, eraser, and sharpener. Don't bring a bag. Don't have a bag anywhere on the table. Don't have a pencil case anywhere on the table. And you can also have to bring current or photo bearing identification document. Make sure it's not a photocopy, so make sure it's the actual document itself. And then you're also going to need a clear water bottle with no label attached. One thing that you do need for the online exam is that you need a mirror. So I don't know why they specify it. It's probably just to make sure that there's nothing around. You can also have like a handheld mirror is okay, or any kind of reflective device for the actual day itself. Now, what I would say that we haven't really talked about much is that it is a very different environment having an online exam. So what I would say is that, there are pros and there are cons to having an online exam. The pros is that it takes away a lot. I mean a lot of the stress that you'd have when you actually go in, and I'm sure the other guys can talk about this as well. But you're not going to see anyone else. You don't have to talk to anyone else. You don't need to worry about traveling. You don't need to worry about waiting 2-3 hours, bathroom breaks, and etc. So that is a pro. And probably the disadvantage of having an online exam is, as you all are quite aware by this stage, is that there can be technical difficulties. And what I would recommend for that is to make sure that you minimize the chances of any kind of technical difficulties. And that kind of brings me on to one of the other questions that I had in mind, which was what are the technical specifications. So a must do for everyone to sit in their exam in 2.5 weeks is to go on the ACER website. And there is a booklet for the 2022, and they go through the exact specifications that you need for your laptop, and make sure you read that. And, of course, you can't use a phone, you can't use an iPad, and you can't use any kind of tablet. So make sure it's a laptop or it's a computer, that it's running the appropriate software. I think it has to be at least Windows 7 if you're using Windows. So make sure you have a look at that. And, if your computer isn't suitable, try to borrow someone else's for the day. Make sure that it's fully charged for the day. You have it ready, and just try and simulate the exam as much as you can before the actual day. So again, like we were saying to take practice tests. For you guys, you can use that to your advantage. So wherever you're taking the exam on the day, wherever the clear table is, try and simulate that exam, the real exam, as much as you can. So only have your laptop and have your A4 size paper, your pencils, etc. Nothing else. A water bottle with clear label, and that's not only to minimize the effect of any kind of technical glitches that can happen on the day, but it also kind of puts you in that mindset, which I think you heard from Ahmad before. So if you're in that mindset of I'm doing this now, you kind of get into that routine, and when you go on the actual day, it won't be as big of a deal because that stress and all that anxiety won't hit you as hard. So that's what I would say for that. So we have another question here. Our mock exam finishes 1 day before Hpat. How can we avoid stress and pressure? Okay, so you say you have your mocks right before the Hpat. Yeah. Okay. So of course that's not a very a great situation to be in. Of course, the mocks are quite important, and I know for you guys especially, it's quite hard because they've decided to put in the traditional exams again, and you guys really haven't had that exposure in the last 2 years in school. And I'm sure that everyone's talking about how much harder the mocks are compared to the Leaving Cert. So what I would say is just completely zip that out. Yes, I'm just going to tell you about the mocks real quick, because of course we've all done the Leaving Cert as well. Yes, the mocks are hard, but they're not that hard. They're not impossible, and they are doable. What I'll also say is don't worry too much about the mocks. The mocks aren't the end of the world. I think I barely got any. I barely got any H1s or H2s in my actual mocks. Like I did terrible on my mocks because I decided to completely focus on the Hpat, because this is a very high stakes exam. Of course, you all know that. I'm not going to reiterate that to you, but you have to kind of prioritize what is more important here: your mocks or your Hpat. I'm not saying don't take the mocks at all, and feel free to if you want, because it is a good practice of simulating the actual exam and being in that time frame. But what I would say is don't worry about what score you're going to get. Don't worry about studying as much as you can and trying to cover as much content as possible for the mock exams. But just go in there and just get it done with. Because what I would recommend is try and focus on the Hpat and make sure you're in a really good mindset. Especially for the test day. So for that, I'd say, don't worry too much about the mocks, and don't stress out about it. Use the techniques that we have in place about minimizing your stress. So I think Hpat has already talked about that. He's talked about positivity. He's talked about journaling. And I know you probably have heard this before and you're like, I'm not going to journal. Like, I don't know what this is about. But honestly, just try it out. Just try and write it out. Maybe just go on notes, type out how you're feeling. I know it's a very weird thing to do, and I never thought I would personally do it myself. But it's it's a practice that I still use to this day, even before medical school exams, because it really does help. What I would say as well, I know this is going a bit off tangent, but the best advice I can give for the Hpat in terms of mindset is to go into the exam as if it was a game. Go into it as if it was something that you can it's an obstacle that you're trying to overcome and you're just getting it out of the way. Don't think of it anything more or anything less, because you don't want to downplay the exam and ignore all your stress. But at the same time, you don't want to overplay the stress and let that get to you and let the anxiety and all those feelings come up. Just look at it as a game. Be like, okay, this is something that I have to do, that I want to do, and something that that I want to beat. So something that I want to beat and get over with. And I want to use all of my time and all of the study that I've put in, no matter how inconsistent or consistent my practice results were. You have put in the time, you have put in the effort. So what I'd say is just go in there with the best mindset possible and be like, I just want to get this over with, and show the Hpat test takers how much work I've put into the actual exam.
Actually, sorry, just another thing for the mock exams. You can, if you want, you can speak to your teachers before going into them, or like before they start, and you can just tell them that you're doing the Hpat. So if it's possible, you can either do the exam at a different date, or even if they don't let you do that, you can just say, okay, like I am focusing on the Hpat, so it won't be like a sort of an accurate reflection of how well I'm doing. It's more just like I'm focusing on a different thing at the moment. And the Hpat has the weight of 3 Leaving Cert exams, and yeah, obviously, like you have to focus on the Hpat when it's there. So yeah, just communicate with your teachers, because some schools do accommodate for Hpat students. Like they can do their exams a week or 2 after the rest of the school does it. I just didn't really study for my personal exams. I just did it at the same date. But I said it to all my teachers beforehand that like I'm focusing on the Hpat at that point, and that I wouldn't be studying for it, and that it won't be like an accurate reflection of how I'm doing. And then they know at that point that like, okay, I have something else on at that time. So just communicate with your teachers beforehand so that they know what you're doing.
Yeah, no, really good point, Adil.
And if I can just add on to that, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Just agreeing with what Adil said, if you talk to your teachers, they'll usually be quite accommodating. I remember my year was the first year we had COVID, and when we did our mocks, we didn't know that we wouldn't be doing a Leaving Cert and that it would be predicted. So I like studied very little to nothing for most of my subjects because I was focusing on the Hpat, but I just told my teachers. So when we ended up getting our predicted grades, despite the fact that I got significantly lower on my mocks than I had been getting in other tests or just in class and stuff, they acknowledged that because I told them, I'm studying for Hpat, and they realized, okay, that's fine. And even when they predicted it, they predicted me higher than my mocks, like especially for the subjects that I had tanked in. So I'd say don't worry about that too much. If the last day is an exam of the exams are a subject you're confident in or happy with, you could even just ask to not sit that exam and just take the day off and relax.
Yeah, no, really good point. If you can't ask your teachers, that would probably be the best case scenario. Just to, because this exam is important and you don't want to have anything that kind of neglects you from being in that proper mindset. Okay, so the next question is, would you recommend skimming through each section before starting the section to see the overall layout? So I guess you could, if you wanted to. I would recommend that if you wanted to do this, try it out in a practice exam beforehand and then see if it does help you. It could kind of, relieve your kind of anxiety because you're like, I have no idea what's coming next. But if you kind of skim it at first, for some people, it does help because they're like, okay, I know what I'm kind of going into. What I would say is though, that don't spend too much time skimming, and maybe a couple of seconds, maybe just flick through it really quickly. Maybe it's more for that kind of mindset feeling of that, this is just one paper. And after once I've finished it, I'm finished it. But I would say skim if you want, but don't spend too much time skimming as well, because you want to really focus on the individual questions as well.
Just on the question about skimming through the exam, I did that a little bit for section 1, and I found I didn't spend very long on it, like literally just 1 minute of skimming really, really quickly, looking at the question stems, just trying to figure out what kind of questions were there. And I realized that the last 4 questions in my section 1 were significantly easier, or at least they looked quite easy, like not a lot to read. Questions seemed quite simple. They were logical reasoning as well, which I was very good at. And I felt it was a bit easier because the moment I started the exam, I just clicked straight to those super easy 4 questions I saw at the end of the thing, got this done really quick, then went back to the start. So it basically costed me about a minute, but I felt in that situation it was worth it anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, really good point. Okay, so the next question is, how much time should a 5th year spend on Hpat every week? When practicing questions for the 3 sections, would it be better to focus on 1 question at a time, or to look at a bit of all 3 and then do each section? So if you're in 5th year, it's first of all, it's great that you're at this talk because you're already ahead of 90% of your peers. If you wanted to start, you can. Personally, I never did. I only did start in 6th year in September, but I don't see any harm in starting in 5th year just to get that experience in and try. And as Ahmad was saying earlier, the more questions you do, the better odds you have at seeing it on the real exam. So I don't see any harm in doing that, but I wouldn't necessarily give you a specified time, how much time to spend on it. What I would say is that 5th year is your opportunity to build your foundations of your Leaving Cert. So definitely don't neglect your Leaving Cert. You want to make sure that you have the basics down for 6th year as well, because 6th year is a very hard year. But yeah, if you want, a couple of hours a week here and there on Saturdays and Sundays, if you want to have a look at different questions, by all means do. You can also go at a slower rate, and there's no huge time pressure commitment on yourself as well. In terms of looking at different sections, if you're in 5th year, definitely focus on 1 section at a time. I'd even recommend the same in 6th year up until you're before the last few weeks of the exam. So I'd say that definitely focus on 1 section at a time and make sure you kind of know what they're asking, why they're asking it, and employ those different techniques that we talk about. So yeah.
Sorry, just on the thing about when you're in 5th year, I feel like a pretty good idea would be, as Sadhusan and Adil said before, on section 2, when you start just reading a few fiction novels and things like that, you can start getting into that. If you want, you could also get started on learning your vocab. I know myself, I started learning my vocab quite early because my older brother Umar, he told me it was very important, and I think it came in handy to know all the complex feeling words and all that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, definitely reading is a huge thing. You probably heard me on the recording before talking about it there. Yeah, definitely try and read as much as you can. I used to recommend to students to try and go for maybe 30 minutes each night of reading, instead of spending that time on Instagram or TikTok. Just literally take out a book and just read it for 30 minutes. You'd be surprised about how much you can actually get done if you just consistent with it. Yeah, the fifth year is definitely your opportunity to explore different books, non-fiction, fiction, and even go on journals. Like Imad was saying, I know they might seem quite complex to look at, but they're very good in terms of your actual HPAT, kind of seeing what kind of passages, what kind of complexity they will present to you. Okay, so are there any extra tips you have for identifying the type of question in section 3? How should we learn the techniques required to answer the questions? So section 3 for me personally, that was starting off, that was one of my worst sections. I remember I did a mid-entry exam, and I remember the first section 3 that I did, I got something like 5th percentile. And that definitely humbled me a lot. But what I would say is it is definitely something that you can improve. And the only way to improve is by doing as many questions as possible. And I know you've heard us say this hundreds and hundreds of times, but it is true. The more questions you do, every time you look at a question, try and be like, okay, what kind of technique can I involve here? And how can I get to the answer as fast as I can? I know there's a lot of, especially nowadays in the last 2 years, that a lot of different companies have been putting out different techniques. Use what's best for you, and then just try and employ that as much as you can. Something that I did, and I know this will probably be only helpful for 5th years, not 6th years at this point, but if you're in 5th year, what I would recommend is that in section 3, I got like one of those A5 maths copybooks I use in primary school, and I used to just literally draw out all the patterns in that copybook. And by the end of the last couple of weeks up to the HPAT, I would just skim through that really quick, and I felt that was a really good way of kind of solidifying different patterns, because you're going to notice the more questions you do that there is going to be the same patterns repeating over and over again. And when it came to the actual exam, on the HPAT, on the test day for me, I tried to use the techniques. This is kind of a personal experience. I tried to use the techniques, but I found that I just kind of picked an answer because I kind of felt it was right. And it was just after doing so many section 3 questions that was kind of just ingrained in my brain. And section 3 ended up being my best section out of all 3. So what I would say is definitely do as many questions as you can. If you're in 5th year, get started on that A5 copybook. Just draw out the patterns, nothing too special, just literally just scribble it out, because it definitely will help your learning over time. Okay, so the next question is, how do mid-entry practice exam percentiles translate to actual percentiles in the real HPAT? So they definitely are harder than the actual thing. And it is really, I understand how disheartening it can be to do a mid-entry exam, spend your Saturday morning doing it, and then right after you get that result and it's just not what you wanted, or it's just terrible. And what I would say is that you have to remember, and I know this is really hard to, it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to actually take it in and actually apply it to yourself, is that the percentile does not matter in the actual exam. I know you've heard that before as well, but you have to remember that every single exam that you do is simply a way of finding out where your weaknesses are and improving on those weaknesses, so that you build up as many strengths as you have for the actual exam day. So definitely don't worry about the percentiles at all. Even if it is like, I've seen so many people where they've had very high percentiles in their practice exams and then score completely different on the real thing, and vice versa. So some people will only get like 40, 50, 40, 50, and they wouldn't even be improving, but they were putting in the work, and they were making sure to going through the exam as detailed as possible, going through the answers and the explanations. And even though they were only scoring 40th, 30th, 50th percentile on the mid-entry exam, in the real thing, they scored really well. So I would say don't worry too much about the percentiles at all. And remember that the only thing that you're going to be tested on is actual day, is actual Hpat. So that's why we stress the importance of timing, and we stress the importance of mindset as well.
Another thing I'd just like to add on there is remember the people who are doing the exams on mid-entry, especially the later exams. They're all the people who have been working for the last few months probably. They're the ones doing the drills, the ones doing the exams, going through their answers. When you're doing the actual Hpat, there are people who turn up with literally zero preparation, thinking they'll just like chance their arm. There are people who turn up half-heartedly. There are people who turn up and have a bad day. So if you are practicing and you have been practicing for the last few weeks or months, then you should be confident in yourself that you're in the top few percent of people that actually have put in the work. And there's a really good chance that you'll get it. And just be confident in yourself. Like if you go in with a poor mindset of, oh, the last exam I did, I only got the 40th, 50th percentile, or even worse, you're just giving yourself a bad mindset, and you're going to be like questioning each decision you make in the exam. Go in thinking, you know, I've put in this much work. I've done this many hours of study for the last however many weeks. I've done all of these exams, all of these drills, all of this practice. So you're ahead of most of the people. So just like be confident in yourself, and it will help you have a better score in the end.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think 100% it's basically all about mindset and things. So as Azam was saying, you will have some people who do the Hpat and they wouldn't have done a practice course like mid-entry and such, and then that would probably give you a little bit of a boost in your percentiles. However, I wouldn't bank on it. You know, I wouldn't think, yeah, once I go in there, there'll be a lot of people who haven't really practiced and they'll bring my percentile up by like 20 percentiles or something. I wouldn't bank on that. But the main thing you need to know is that keep telling yourself you've done the practice. You know, keep your head held up high. You know, just walk in without feeling stress on the exam day. Because I know myself, I actually had a couple of friends, and we would do mid-entry practice tests and such together, and they would score same as me, a little bit lower, a little bit higher sometimes. So we're all about the same. But sadly, sometimes you know, during the exam day, the stress kind of got to some of them, and you know, their mid-entry exams didn't translate to the day, and it was all just down to stress. You have to always make sure that you're not like feeling really down about yourself, about your exams, and like just try and be confident and know in yourself that you've done the preparation and you do have the ability to score highly.
Yeah, just on that as well, a positive outlook is really, really beneficial. Like, I can't stress that enough. Like, maybe like for the week beforehand, just like see if your like family can be a bit nicer to you or something like that, or just anything to really like to get your mood up, because like that can really, really improve your score. And yeah, especially for like section 2 as well, because that's really all about emotion. So if you're in a happier state, you can sort of answer things a bit easier. So yeah.
On that note, I'm sorry, it's not my expertise, but being two sons, Saad and Umar, they're both in medical college. I know it's very important. You can pass on to your parents as well. And if some parents listening, I'll give them direct message. I think it's a very stressful and very important exam for your children, for the career. So around that exam and during that time, a few weeks before that, try to keep them best atmosphere so they can focus without any problems around them. That is very important.
Okay, yeah, really good advice. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so just 2 more questions I'll go through real quick. So the next question was, would the time from now till the Hpat be enough to learn vocab and vocab lists, or is it too late? It's never too late. Even when you're the night before, don't worry about vocab too much. Definitely have a go at the vocab today and find a list right now and try and read maybe 10 or 15 words a day and try and build it up. You have plenty of time. You still have 2.5 weeks. And I think now would definitely be the best time to start the vocab. So you're in that position where you remember the different words, but you're also not learning it too early so that you forget it for the actual exam. So yeah, I'd say definitely go for the vocab. Try and do as many words you can, but again, there's always going to be a lot of different words that you can't possibly memorize every single word in the English language. But I would say definitely try to go for as much vocab as well, and preferentially go for the vocab that they stress in the Hpat practice exams. So especially in the ACER exams, you want to know every single word in those exams. So is there any word in section 2 that you've never heard of before? Make sure that you're 100% okay with that for the real deal. And one thing that they have done in recent years, and I know Adil has touched upon this, but I just want to talk about it one more time, was that make sure you know the difference between different words. So, they could say in a passage, is he annoyed or is he angry? And they both seem kind of similar, and that's a very simplified example, but they would have words that are very similar but are slightly different on the scale of intensity. So make sure you not only know the definition of words, but also know where they kind of go on that kind of scale of intensity. And then the second last question that we have here is, if you do well on section 2 and 3 and met in section 1, would you say that you will get a good overall score? Definitely. So this is a really good question. I know that a lot of different people have their strengths. So some people will be good at section 1 and 3. Some people would only be good at section 2. It definitely depends on yourself. And for the actual day, we talk about weaknesses a lot, but for the actual day, you want to focus on your strengths. So personally, I was the exact same. Section 1 was probably my worst, and then section 2 and 3 were my best. So I knew going into section 1 that I just have to get this section over with. I don't know how well I'm going to do, but I'm just going to have a go at it and then just forget about it. And then once that section's over, I was so happy because I was just like, I got the worst one over with, and now I can focus on section 2 and 3 because I know I can absolutely crush it. So definitely go in with the mindset of knowing where your strengths are, which sections you're better at. And when you get to that section, you kind of have that boost of confidence where you're like, okay, this is my section. I'm just going to absolutely kill this. But I've seen people getting up to the 99th, 100th percentile, and they've even had sections that they weren't good at. So it's entirely up to you. And I know like one girl that I knew, she was only good at section 2. She hated section 1, section 3, but the fact that she scored so high in section 2 contributed to her overall percentile. Okay. Next question is, how many percentage of vocab that came up that was hard in the whole exam? So that definitely depends on what they decide to do. So obviously we can't predict what they're actually going to do in the actual exam. Of course, there are different practice questions and practice exams, but they'll always have new questions, new ways of presenting questions. So when we talk about vocab, we basically mean that you want to be in a position where if some sort of hard vocab was to come up, you would be in the best position to answer it. But we aren't guaranteeing that there will be vocab at all. Some years they decide to not put in any kind of hard vocab at all. And instead what they tend to do is that they put in 2 different options that are quite easy to understand, but are very, very similar. And it takes a little bit of extra thinking to kind of decipher which of the 2 options are correct. So it definitely depends on what they decide to do. But I say vocab is kind of that thing that you just want to do so that if, in case it does come up, you're not in the position of, why didn't I learn this before? So that's what I'd say about vocab there.
Actually, just to add on to that, like sometimes in those questions as well, like, I mean, maybe like a word that you recognize, but then, and actually about what Asad was saying, that like 2 words can be really similar to each other. And sometimes you have to know which connotations they're used in. Like there's two words, reflective and pensive, I believe. They're the 2, they essentially have the exact same meaning, but I think pensive is used in a slightly more negative, has slightly more negative connotations, or so it's, it would be used in a negative sort of reflection, whereas reflection is just more general. I mean, that was just one example. I'm not sure if that is 100% accurate, but like, I mean, I remember doing a question in like one of the practice exams, and like I said reflective, but then it was actually pensive. It was just because the negative connotation. So like being able to know what context those words are used in, so that can also be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, and then the next question is taking a Hpat course in 6th year beneficial? So I would say that taking any kind of Hpat course is definitely beneficial. I guess you mean for next year, if you are in 6th year, I would definitely recommend going for as many questions as you can. That's the number one thing. And of course, we will have another hopefully in-person Hpat course which will be a lot more interactive, which will hopefully organize somewhere in August if you are in 5th year right now. So definitely keep an eye out for that. But what I would say is that, a lot of people go to different courses and different stuff, but the number one thing that you can do is as many questions as possible. Courses are really good for getting that initial guidance and coming up to the exam, those last minute tips and tricks. But I would say that you can do as many courses as you want, but if you don't actually put in the work and do as many questions as possible, you're just putting yourself at a disadvantage. So I'd say the number one priority would definitely be doing questions, but courses are definitely beneficial in some sort of way or another. But I would stick with 1 or 2 different courses. Don't overburden yourself, because a lot of different companies have different ways of teaching, and you just want to stick with the method that works best with you and then just work with that. Okay, and then the final question here is, how close are Section 2 drills and exams on mid-entry compared to the actual exam in terms of length? Because mid-entry ones seem quite long and harder. So I do remember that mid-entry ones can be quite hard, especially for Section 2, and they do definitely vary in difficulty. I know that I think it was the doctor-patient interactions in mid-entry were a bit easier, but then some of the excerpts from fiction novels, you just read the whole passage and you would be like, I have no idea what is going on at all. So what I would say is that it can vary. Sometimes the actual exam would be a little bit easier or a little bit harder, but I would say that especially for Section 2, you're reading a lot. You're reading a huge passage. In my exam, there definitely was these kind of longer and harder passages and slightly easier questions. So they do like to mix it up. So who knows what they're going to do in the actual exam. But what I would say is that they really could do anything. They could have a very hard passage or a very simple passage, but they would make up for that in terms of the questions. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. And remember that whatever questions that you see on Section 2, everyone else is in the exact same boat as you. So your only job is to do the best that you can do, and not stress about because they could definitely give you some sort of hard passage or even like a weird poem or something, and it would be very hard to decipher what's going on. But I would just say give it your best shot and just move on. Don't worry too much about the harder questions on Section 2, because they definitely have to make it a little bit harder in some retrospect to compare yourself to others. So again, if you have any extra questions, again, these are really good questions. If you have any more, just pop it in. We'll be happy to help you out. If you guys want to add anything else as well, go ahead.
Yeah, just in terms of like the length of like for the questions, I found like, yeah, the length's quite similar, but like in the actual exam, I struggled a bit more with the timing for Section 2. Like I tended to finish maybe with 4 minutes to spare in the practice exams. But then in the actual exam, I like just got it done like right at the end. So I don't know if that's just the actual length of the exam, or perhaps because when I did it, it was a paper. We did it like in person, so it perhaps could have been that, like, trying to doing all my practice online and then doing it on paper. But like in general, I felt that it was a bit longer in the actual exam, so just kind of be prepared for that. Yeah. But the rest of everything else is exactly the same as itself. They can vary in difficulty and stuff.
Yeah. Just adding on to what Anam said about Section 2 drills and stuff on mid-entry, I felt like they were a bit harder for me personally, because the vocab I felt was a bit harder as well. This is a good thing and a bad thing as well, because if you're doing mid-entry and you see the difficult vocab, I would actually just write that down in my notebook, look up on Google the definition of the emotion or whatever, and then that would actually increase my knowledge of emotion words and such. So it can be a bit of a good thing as well in that sense.
Yeah, I actually had the same experience as Adil. I actually remember struggling to finish Section 2, which was a bit weird for me because the passages were just so long. I almost had to kind of skim read the passages. So I say don't worry about it too much. Just focus on your time and just make sure you get the questions done.
I would like to add as well, I think someone asked earlier about the length of questions in Section 1. So if you've been doing practice exams and you're used to a certain length in any section, and you go to the exam and you realize that the questions are longer, or maybe you're just working slower, whatever it is, just remember that it's the same for everybody. So if the questions are really time constrained, if you realize, there's an extra line or two on every single question, so it's building up over time, whatever it may be, just remember it's the same for everybody. So try not to panic and just try to work through them and get an answer, an educated guess at least, for every single question you can.
Yeah, no, really good point. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm just going to answer this last question, and then hopefully we'll wrap it up right after that. If you have any extra questions, feel free to reach out to the email or the website or anything else, and we could definitely help you out there. So the last question is, what's the best way to improve section 1 in this time frame? So reading's beneficial, but is there anything else you can possibly do? So I'm assuming, of course, you're in 6th year and you only have 2 weeks. For section 1, I'd say definitely know your mental maths. That's something that's similar to vocab in that it might or might not come up. Like you might not even have to use it. I know that in my exam, I didn't have to use that much mental maths, but if it does come up, you definitely want to use it to your advantage. So stuff like, fractions, percentages, simple division, multiplication, just make sure you're okay with it, because you're not allowed to have a calculator in the actual exam. But apart from that, I'd say definitely just practice timing right now for section 1. Use what kind of rule you want. I know that I said that I think it was actually Saw that said to do 11 questions in 15 minutes. So stick with some kind of time frame. Practice doing that watch thing that Imad was saying. Hopefully that will help you a lot, because that's the main thing. For me, I said that I thought that section 1 was definitely one of those kind of time constraining activities, and especially if you come across a hard question, again, make sure that you don't spend too much time on it. Pick an answer, move on, and try and nail down as many questions as you can where you know that you are comfortable answering those questions. But in terms of the next 2 weeks, I'd say don't focus, especially for section 1, don't focus on hammering in as many section 1 questions as possible. I'd say definitely just try and get your timing right and get your mindset right, and your mental maths. Any of you guys want to add anything about section 1 there?
I think you got it covered pretty well there.
Yeah. Okay, so just one more question said that since this year is online, is it true the exam on each day is slightly different to the previous day? So that I'm not actually aware of, because I actually sat the exam when it was the written paper, but I would say don't worry about that. I'd say, because I know that it's between the 18th to 22nd of February. You pick when you want to do your exam. Don't focus on if the exam is the same or is it different. None of that actually matters, and don't go around being like to your friends, being like, okay, do you guys get this question? Like get this question, because honestly, it's very hard to remember what comes up in the actual exam, and is not really going to help you in that much of a way. If anything, it'll just stress you out more. But I'd say for those couple of days, stick to yourself, get the exam done with, and then just get it out of your mind as soon as you can. So so that's all the questions that we're going to answer for today. Again, I'd like to thank all the presenters, the executive committee, and I'd like to thank all of you guys for showing up. I know that you had to take time out of your day, so we really appreciate you guys being here, and hopefully it was beneficial. If you do have any further questions, I'd recommend that you email us and let us know, and we'll be happy to help you out. If you are in 5th year, definitely take this advice on board, and remember that we will have another session coming up in August, so definitely come to that. And if you guys are taking the exam in 2 weeks, I would wish you guys the best of luck. Again, I'm not going to reiterate all the advice that you've just been given over the last couple of hours, but I would say the number one thing, like we said, is mindset. Just go in there, just take the exam, and then leave. That's the only thing that you can do at this point. Don't stress about it at all. I know it's very hard to get stressed out, very hard to get that anxiety feeling. But like I said, the number one thing that I like to do is think of it like a game, get it done, beat the final boss, and then you're finished. And then hopefully you'll never have to do it again. So so thanks a lot, guys. And hopefully we'll see you guys in the next session.
That's fine. I think, I hope everybody has completed a feedback form. We can leave this meeting running for few minutes. If somebody who haven't completed can complete. And as Saad and other speakers mentioned, we have more detailed discussion on section 1, 2, and 3 from our previous webinar recording, which will be available soon on our YouTube and Facebook page. So both of these will be available for 5th year. If they want to see more details about the sections, they can watch our previous webinar, which is more detailed for the section itself.
Thank you, Khalid bhai. Now today the boy did the very well done. This kind of very short notice, and it is a good play. Both from the 5th year and the 6th year as they combine. And most of the people I check it from starting, they are too much interested, and until 50 or 55 people stay on focus. So I'm very happy about this kind of course, and it's happy for the junior and this Hpat courses.
To be honest, I was really surprised. So high standard of this Hpat has gone now. I have attended the other one as well, but this one is really, really gone high up. As all my children, my students. To be honest, Saad and whoever is participating, I don't know the name of everybody. They are.
We had Adil,
very nice presentation, very nice speaking, very nice control, no hesitation, no anxiety, no missing steps or anything. Very nice way it was presented, and well done to be boys, well done team. Excellent performance. And I'm happy in this way that we are keeping the standard of our presentation, and which is one of them, the Hpat. So well done, boys. Congratulations. To be honest.
Thanks, Harun. And on this note, I will say, this is what we want. We want our young generation come with us. We are not as good as they are. They have a lot of potential. We want them to come forward and take over whatever they can take for their, what they deserve. And alhamdulillah, they are excellent. And I think, inshallah, this is other thing which I'm taking a opportunity to talk to you 4 guys, and we talk to more. Start with 10, 12 of you, and we build a group, because you Pakistani origin students, you have a lot of potential and talent, and we want you to combine together somewhere, and we'll provide the platform.
We were essentially just giving a guide and tips for all students at different stages in their preparation that we ourselves used, and that can't really be found anywhere else.
We have created this event with the intention of giving the highest quality advice about the Hpat exam that we wish we had when we were secondary school students.
This talk was set up by the Irish Pakistani Professionals Association. IPPA have held an in-person event and an online webinar for Hpat advice in the past. IPPA is happy to provide help and guidance to all future professionals.
We catered this event not only to those students who are sitting the exam this year in 2 weeks' time, but also to those who are looking to sit it next year. And we had participants from both cohorts who attended and benefited from this event.